The story begins when a king finds himself in a dark place and thinks he never believed the phenomenon people called the light at the end of the tunnel. Those rare occurrences where people, after waking from near-death experiences, would exclaim they saw the light with cold sweat rolling down the sides of their faces. He finds himself in a tunnel and wonders how he died. The last thing he remembers is that he was alone in his room and was looking at the city from his room. After that, his body felt heavy as he lay down on his bed, and he wondered if he was poisoned or assassinated. Too many people wanted him dead since he was a king. However, as much as he wants to figure out his death, he can't do anything about it anymore, and he has no choice but to go along with it. When he opens his eyes, he finds out that he was just born, and his parents look at him affectionately. He can understand their language, which is a good sign. His father waves toward him, while his mother gets angry at him and says he has just been born. He feels his surroundings are ordinary enough, and he's surprised to see only some styles of clothes there. His mother takes him in her lap, and he wonders where he is actually. Weeks slowly trickled by, and his mother, Alice, was a gentle and kind-hearted lady who held the reins tightly in the family. His father, Reynolds, was dependable and charismatic, if he ignored his occasional childishness. While he was thankful that he had been born into a loving family, his life was filled with difficulties that he wouldn't wish upon even his enemies. He has little command over his limbs and cannot control the bodily functions that come with this prison of flesh. When his mother changes his clothes, he feels so ashamed, his years of mental fortitude honed as a king and a representative of his country, and the faint hope that this was all a dream were the only things keeping him sane. It seemed like he had been transported to the past in a much more archaic period, and he wondered if people usually carried around weapons in the past. He is supposed to assume those vials of suspicious-looking liquids that they pass off as medicine are being sold legally. He is walking through the market with his mother, and she asks him if they should get home. Now he wants to say no, but can't. Knowledge is his strength, and he has assessed his surroundings over the past weeks and is confident that he has a firm grasp on what to expect. Suddenly, his father appears from the side and lifts him up in the air. He throws him upward, and his mother shouts at him, saying he will drop him. He catches him in his arms and laughs loudly, disappointed over his fragile little body. His father says his grandfather did this when he was younger, and he tossed him again and again in the air for fun. In the meantime, his knee hits the wall, and he starts crying. He finds out that his mother is a healer, and she heals his wound in an instant. Ray thinks he may speak too soon, and this may be because he knows nothing of this world. After all, in his previous life he was a king and led armies in which everyone obeyed him. He fought many battles and outdueled representatives from countries all over the world. Out of all his accomplishments, he had never been as proud as he is at this moment when he crawls. His mother worries that he may hit his head on the corner. His father asks her to block him from getting near the shelf. He crawls toward a wall mirror and sees his reflection in the mirror, and his parents are happy that their son, Art, is looking at himself in the mirror. It has been months, and he is still unused to his new name as a former king. Art is a little too cute for him, and looking at himself there, he has to admit that he is absolutely adorable. He is sure that he will break many hearts in the future. That same night, when he is sleeping, his mother kisses him and leaves his room, but as soon as she leaves, he opens his eyes and starts his mission. He throws his blanket from the cot and tries to get down to the ground. He then jumps on the blanket and thinks his mother, Alice, left him while sleeping. He has approximately an hour before she comes back to check on him. He swiftly crawls behind her and goes to the study room. He is happy about the success of his mission. Ever since discovering this place, he has been sneaking in every night to learn more about this world. He finds out that Dickathon, the continent he had been born in, comprises 3 major kingdoms: Alanoir, the 11 kingdoms deep in the forest; Darv, the vast underground kingdom and the homes of the dwarves; Saipan, the human kingdom, is easily the most populated region. However, this world and his previous one shared a monarch system, but rulership there is passed down rather than earned. He found early on that this world is vastly underdeveloped compared to his old world. He realized that the reason for the lack of technological advancement was magic. He opens up a book titled Beginning Guide for the Privileged Mage, and remembers that in his old world they had a life force called Kai, used by practitioners to strengthen their bodies and weapons through rigorous training. This world has a similar force called Mana, and unlike Kai, which existed only inside a person, mana is, and all around them, the power to control mana is mainly genetic. Roughly 1 in 100 children possess it. However, mana can be used in various ways, and the two most common methods are augmenting and conjuring. Augmenters enhance their bodies with mana, allowing them to possess incredible strength, defense, and agility. However, their weakness lies in their limited range, and conjurers emit mana to the outside world, allowing them to bend their surroundings to their will. However, they must supply their own mana core with mana from the outside world to form a spell. His mother called them a deviant, more specifically, an emitter. They are a rare type of mage able to cast unique restorative mana. According to this book, a mage's first awakening happens between early and late teenage years, when their mana core manifests. It sounded uncannily similar to the chi center in his previous life. Children were taught to meditate to form a chi center, since the fragments of chi were scattered inside their bodies and gathered into a single place. He wonders if this will work in this world too. He sits, tries to collect his kai, and soon finds out it works. Suddenly, Elise approaches him, grabs him from behind and says she worries about him. She feels his expressions a bit strange, and asks him if he is having trouble taking a poo pie, and he thinks he is about to begin his journey to become the greatest mage in this world, and she can't make him out to be a constipated infant. He releases gas, and Elise thinks he has no trouble, and that it's time to change his diaper. He is ashamed that he had soiled his diaper amidst his concentration. 2 years have passed, and Elise thinks it feels like she's learning more about her baby with each passing day. She has concluded that her son Arthur must be the most adorable baby in the world, with his patch of auburn hair and azure eyes that look at her almost intelligently. She knows he will get into trouble in the future if she doesn't become a strict and dependable mother. It's not like she can rely on her husband Ray. After that, she comes outside and is shocked to see that Ray has given Art a stick. She furiously stares at them and makes them scared. She caught him trying to teach their baby how to fight when he could barely crawl. Once she takes him to the market, and Arthur rushes toward a weapon shop. She has noticed that he loves going to the small merchant strip in Central Ash rather than shopping for groceries once or twice a week. They go downtown every other day, where Arthur loves to go to the merchant's shop. She thinks she is not spoiling him, but they go to have fresh food in the house and for educational purposes. Watching him grow up so quickly, she wonders how he will be when he is older. With Ray as his father, she has no doubt that he will be interested in becoming an adventurer, but she can't help but worry about him. She can only hope that he fares better than the naive young teens hoping to make it big as adventurers. She thinks she can only do something about his perpetual habit of sneaking into the study. She has been tempted to move his crib into the study, but that is for another day. After that, she closes her journal and leaves the room. On the other side, Arthur is standing in the window and looking outside where his father is training himself. Approximately 2 years have passed since he first made his difficult journey to study, and he has learned a lot since then, but it's been fascinating to learn new things every day. He observes Ray chanting something for a few minutes, and now he concentrates really hard. Suddenly he gathers so much pressure in his arms and moves the rock to the ground. Arthur wonders what magical phenomenon he has used, and is shocked to see what he has done. He shows some fighting tricks in front of him, and asks if his father is awesome or not. Arthur thinks he spent 3 minutes of his utmost concentration flinging something he can physically throw with less effort. Meanwhile, Elise comes to him and asks if he is watching his dad, but she's upset to see that he ruined the front yard again. He learned fairly early on that his father was an augmenter, and he wonders what he will be when his mana core awakens his father. Meditates and trains with full concentration, and they are both watching him quietly. After that, he turns behind but is scared that he may fall from the table, so he moves backwards and tries to crawl from the table, and his mother notices that his eyes are half closed. She thinks he may need a nap, and he tries to go toward the study room, but she doesn't listen to him and says it's nap time. He has no choice, so he requests her to give him books. When she doesn't listen to him, he starts pushing and kicking her. She is angry, but then agrees by saying he can play in the study for a little bit. He then walks away, thinking it's not demeaning since a great warrior must utilize every weapon in his arsenal. He then starts studying the books while his mother watches him. Suddenly, she hears a noise from outside, thinks Ray has crashed one more tree, and leaves him there to check outside. When she is gone, he starts meditating and thinks his biggest accomplishment, aside from the accumulated knowledge of this world, is his progress in forming a core. He spent the last 2 years moving the tens of thousands of tiny fragments of mana inside his body and gathering them together near his solar plexus. He could see why it would take until adolescence to form naturally, seeing how slowly the fragments gravitated toward the center of his body. It was an arduous task, both for his body and mind. But these 2 years had not gone to waste. On the other hand, Ray crashed a tree and tried to save it while Alice laughed at him. In the meantime, Arthur was trying to put his last piece to his core when suddenly an explosion occurred in the house. Alice and Ray were scared and shocked by the destruction, and Ray saved her from the high flames. Ray was very injured from behind and asked her if she was all right. But she remembered Arthur, who was still in there. Ray got up, rushed inside for his son, and forcefully opened the door. He was shocked to see what was happening inside and started laughing loudly. Elise came to him and asked why he was laughing. Ray told her that Arthur was not there, but was already meditating on his core. After some time, he got up and felt great. He thought it felt great to have a core. He felt like the trees looked great, but he suddenly realized the destruction around him. He wondered if they had been attacked, and who dared to destroy a king's house. 1 more year passed, and in this time period, along with his mother teaching him how to read and write, he learned the basics of mana manipulation and augmentation. At first, since his body was too small for sparring, they did basic body workouts, and he went for a walk with his dad to do basic exercises. It wasn't too long ago when his father finally decided he would be okay to practice, and he had gotten him a wooden sword for his 3rd birthday. One day, while studying in his room, Ray entered the house and said, "It's time to train," and he had his sword. He took him outside, asked him to remember what he teaches, and asked him to match the flow of mana with his breathing, like his heart or lungs. His core is just another organ. And he wondered if most 4-year-olds would understand these abstract instructions. They started practical fighting, and he tried to attack him but dodged his sword every time he asked him to do his best, and Arthur said he would not let him rest until he did this. He only had a little bit of time to study before dinner, so he decided to give his all to this last attack. He attacked him with his full might, broke Ray's wooden sword, and made him shocked. He then asked him if he could go and study now, and he happily allowed him to go inside. That same night, when he was meditating, he thought in this world, the color of his mana core measures strength, and the mana core starts black due to the body's blood and other impurities mixing with the mana particles forming the mana core. The mana core becomes more pure as the impurities are filtered out over time, and their color order goes from black, red, orange, yellow, silver, and white. Each stage is split into dark, solid, and light shades. The lighter the mana core, the purer it is, and the more power it has. Suddenly, he heard his mother's voice, and she called him for dinner. He then went for dinner unwillingly, thinking he couldn't get alone time around there and how he was supposed to learn. Meanwhile, Ray called Elise and said it was time they got Arthur a proper mentor. Elise got up angrily and said he was only 4. Decided he said he could teach him. Ray also got up and said he never expected their son to be such a mana manipulation prodigy at 4 years old. He was holding him back, and he had so much potential. She argued with him and said she was not having her child leave home to some city hundreds of miles away. But Ray said US wasn't just some city, and he would make sure his friends took care of him. They fought each other while Arthur watched them quietly. He then clapped the table, and Ray asked him if he wanted to go to a big city and have a real teacher. Arthur was shocked that he was letting him decide, and wondered if this wasn't too much to ask of a 4-year-old. He asked them if they both could come and meet the teacher together. They both stared at each other, and Arthur wondered if he had said something wrong and if his sentence was too complicated. They laughed, and Ray said they hadn't thought about all of them going together. Elise said she might feel better about this if she was there when he was tested and met his teacher. He got up and announced they were going to Cyrus City, so he was shocked to overhear his parents already preparing for the 3-week journey that same night. When he was reading a book, Elise appeared there, grabbed the book from him, and said he needed to get to bed. They were heading out early tomorrow, and he said, "Tomorrow is too fast." Elise also hated rushing like this, but their friends from Twin Horns were also going to Cyrus, so they were taking them along, and his dad was with them right now. She kissed his head and said she better catch him staying up reading again, and he could bring some books for the trip tomorrow. He knew the Twin Horns had been in the area for a while, and even helping rebuild their home when they had the time. From what he heard, the party consisted of 2 conjurers, and 3 augmenters, which would help whatever troubles they might encounter. He was finally moving on from this small, quiet town, and it was time to see what this world truly offered. The next morning, they set out on a journey. Ray thanked their twin brothers for taking them on this trip, and asked the fellows to meet his son. He called Arthur, asked him to introduce himself, and respectfully introduced himself. He said his name was Arthur, lay when and thanked them for coming with them to Cyrus. Adam was impressed by his manners, and asked if he was really Ray's son. He was an augmenter, and his specialty was a spear. His wife grabbed him, hugged him tightly, and said he should be thankful that he looked more like his mum. Her name was Angela Rose, and she was a conjurer with a specialty in wind magic. She had grabbed him so tightly that he was unable to breathe, and a man grabbed him from behind, saying she was hurting him. Durden Walker had a specialty in earth magic, and he affectionately put him to the ground. Arthur observed they had another companion named Jasmine Flamesworth, who had a specialty in daggers. She didn't talk to him and left them with another woman. Helen asked him not to mind her, and said she just needed to get used to her. She introduced herself as Helen Shard, with a special ability in magic archery. Ray said everyone had gotten acquainted and must prepare to move on. They put their luggage in the carriages and were ready to go. Soon they started their journey, and Arthur hoped for a good future ahead. At night, they were attacked by many beasts, and they eventually defeated them. After that, they used the wolves for their dinner. They stayed at a place for dinner, and Helen asked him if he was doing good, but he was just staring at Jasmine. Helen said it was his first time traveling like this, and he thought this was surely his first time traveling in this life. She said his father had been bragging nearly the entire way there that he was a genius mage, and asked him if he had really awakened a year ago. Adam got up saying he needed to do a little stretching before going to sleep, and he told him he had been sparring with his boy. He asked him if he minded if he played around with Arthur while he thought he should stretch out by himself. Ray asked him to be careful because they had just barely moved on from light strength and mana exercise into sparring. Adam grabbed his shirt and took him away with him, while Ray and Elise just stared at each other worriedly. Arthur thought normal kids his age could barely climb a flight of stairs, but he guessed that no one thought fighting him was unusual. He took him aside and asked him if he was ready. He asked him if he knew how to reinforce his weapon, and he moved toward him with his tiger attribute. Arthur looked toward his father and told him through telepathy that this man was out for blood. He asked him to get him out of this mess. Ray cheered him up and asked him to go and get him. When he found his request useless, he got ready to fight him. He gripped the sword like an experienced person, gathered his core at a point, and ran toward Adam to attack. Adam used his defensive skill to dodge his attack, but he disappeared from his sight and appeared from behind. He was about to attack him, but his infantile body was not as strong as it needed to be to land this powerful attack. He slashed his sword to attack him, but Adam dodged his attack and counterattacked him. Arthur bowed down, dodged his attack, and jumped from his place to collide with him. Adam lost his balance and was about to fall, when Arthur tried to use this moment to his advantage and tried to hit him again. Adam dodged his attack, got up again to attack him, and hit him with his light stick. At that moment, Newton's third law of motion came to his mind. For every action there is always an equal but opposite reaction. Arthur fell to the ground and Adam rushed to attack him again. Elise shouted for her son, and Adam asked him if the opposite reaction hurt. He got up again, and Durden pushed Adam away. He urged Ray to know what kind of training he put him through to create the little monster. Ray laughed and said he didn't teach him, and Elise tried to heal him and asked if this was what he had been studying. He replied that he learned this by watching his dad and reading some books, and Adam asked him if he was going to teach him some of his movement techniques. He told them that he just had to cross his back leg over his lead leg, and then kick off with mana. While he let his body almost fall, Adam followed his instructions, but collided with a tree instead of learning the skill. Several days passed since they began their journey to Cyrus City, and his birthday also passed. During this time he received gifts for his birthday, and many lessons from his companions. Adam and Durden were taking a bath in the river. Adam, Helen, and his father's training continued with decent progress so far, and they enjoyed their trip to surprise him. Jasmine had already succeeded in learning a few techniques. It still amazed him how Jasmine could grasp his instructions quickly, especially when learning the first step. After some time, they all dressed up to continue the journey, and Elise called Arthur and said they were leaving now they continue their journey, when a monster is watching their carriage from a distance. Adam tells Arthur that he still remembers his father getting them into all sorts of trouble. Helen called him and asked if he was sure that Ray wasn't the only one who caused trouble, and told him about an incident when he messed up. Adam laughed and bragged it was just a little rodent. Elise yawned, and Arthur asked her if she was okay. She replied that she was a little tired. He then opened up a book to study, but he was disturbed by someone. He was unhappy that Jasmine was watching him and asked him to teach her more. He ignored her and continued his reading. When they heard a voice from outside, they all were surprised and wondered what was going on outside. Helen revealed that bandits had attacked them and asked everyone to prepare to engage. Angela led them and asked everyone to submit to the wind, follow her will, and gather to protect each other. Many arrows attacked their carriage simultaneously, and Alice covered Arthur to protect him. Angela's wind skill dodged many arrows. Eventually, Arthur observed them, fighting skillfully, while Durden cracked one of the arrows with his bare hands. They all protected the area by taking their positions, while Helen was injured by many arrows, but was saved due to her armor. She jumped from the carriage to the ground, ready to attack the bandits. Arthur and Alice were worried because they were completely surrounded by bandits. They were in the mountains and were rushing toward their carriage. Their leader appeared there and praised his men for a good catch. He asked them only to leave the women and kids alive and try not to leave scars. After all, he exclaimed that damaged goods would only sell for less. Arthur thought it seemed he had been living in a bubble for too long, and he almost forgot that every world has its own share of filth like him. He was furious at thinking about the bandits. Elise hugged him tightly and asked him not to worry, saying she was there to save him. Arthur felt calm on hearing this. In the meantime, the bandits landed their attack on them, and Durden asked everyone to gather and guard. They had tried to create an earth wall to protect themselves from the arrows, but some passed through it and were coming toward Alice and Arthur. Angela appeared there in time and distracted the arrows from reaching them. Their leader and 2 bandits came forward to attack them, but Helen shot many arrows simultaneously and pushed them back. Durden also fought them bravely and had defeated many of them. Some were scared to see him beating others. Ray also fought them bravely and hit them while moving swiftly. He had grabbed 2 of them and was beating them when a man appeared from behind and was about to attack him. An arrow from the side hit him before he could attack. Ray, Helen had saved him, and they all started fighting them again. Everyone was doing their best, and Adam had defeated many of them in the time being. He was a great warrior, stabbing many bandits with his sword. Helen also jumped upon many of them and hit them with the sword. Meanwhile, a man came to attack her, but she moved swiftly and dodged his attack. He again came to attack her, saying he would train her so well that she would begin to stay with him. In the end, he threw his rope toward her, but she moved swiftly and dodged all attacks. However, she was injured in many places and was disadvantaged against her opponent's range. Arthur observed the situation and wondered if he should help her, but he had no chance against an adult augmenter with this body. In the meantime, they attacked their carriage and Ray was injured. Alice and Arthur were shocked to see his condition, and he angrily stared at the leader, who was watching them silently. He asked Elise to heal his father, but he observed something was wrong with his mother. She revealed she couldn't heal him, and Arthur wondered why she wasn't healing the father. Ray said he was fine, and his injuries weren't life-threatening. He asked Arthur to listen to him carefully, and said, after his mother used her healing spell, those bad men were going to go after her. He would be able to fend off the leader, but he was worried about protecting them too. He asked him to take his mother back down the trail they came from, and not to stop. He refused to leave him there and said he could fight and save them. He put his hand on his head and asked him to listen to him carefully, and said he knew that he could fight, and that's why he was entrusting his mother to him. He asked him to protect his mother and also protect the baby inside her. He now remembers his mother being a little tired because she was pregnant. Ray says they planned on telling him when they got to Xyrus, but they won't be able to go there. Arthur promises to save the mother. Ray asks him to get ready because they have got 4 mages on their side. In the meantime, the leader notices Alice's abilities and orders his men to get her as soon as possible. Arthur takes Alice and runs away while Ray tries to block the bandits. Arthur thinks his dad shouldn't die because of them, and Adam also asks everyone to move to their side and protect them. One of them rushes to attack them, but Adam blocks him and asks them to run away when he will hold him down. They start to run away toward the mountain when another man shoots an arrow. Arthur notices the arrow and dodges it with his wooden sword before reaching her, but the arrow was with so much force that it broke his sword and injured his hand too. The bandit is shocked to see that a little boy dodges his attack. In the meantime, Helen shoots him from the side and kills him. She asks Arthur not to stop and saves his mother. He observes that something is wrong and thinks there should be 4 mages. He counts the mages while fighting and counts 3 mages, and he can't find the 4th one. Their leader orders them to forget the plan and kills everyone, including ladies and kids. Arthur wonders who he is talking to and is shocked to see a huge wind swirl flying in the air. The swirl has attacked them, and Arthur thinks that his mother won't be fast enough, even if he can use mana to dodge this. Suddenly, they lose their balance and both fall to the ground. Arthur thinks he must bring the mage down with him if he can't make it. He enters the swirl at his full speed and tries to slash it, but concludes to enter it. He breaks the swirl and jumps up on the mage to attack him. He hopes that his mana string holds out and has held his mother through the string. He is hanging through the mountain while his foot has been injured. The mage is also hanging with a hill, and the rocks are about to crack from where he grabs it. Soon it cracks, and he falls toward the ground. He closes his eyes and is disappointed that he will never be able to see his brother. In his past life, he woke up a morning and left his room, but the maid was scared to see him. He walks through the balcony, where everyone greets the king. He then goes to the council room, where an old man is already present and is surprised to see him. He starts staring at a painting and thinks the council consisted of the ones who actually govern the country, managing its politics and economy. In a world riddled with problems like decreasing birth rates and limited resources, wars were replaced by duels and armies by kings. He was also one of them and admired the old man's handwork. The old man got up and said that while being part of the council is rewarding, he won't lie. He also said he wasn't envious of the fame and glory of the kings received upon victories. He asked him the reason for his unexpected visit, but he removed his gold medal and kept it on the table. The old man was surprised by his action, but the king left the room and said he was retiring. He spent his whole life for the sake of being the strongest, but he couldn't find peace. He was still an orphan. With everyone he cherished, he would give up everything he had in that life for the chance to return to Ashbur and see them all again. He can't forget the memories he has made with them. When he opens his eyes, he finds himself in a forest and wonders if he is still alive. He can see the mage's corpse beside him and turns his face to the other side. He is so injured that he is unable to move and gets unconscious again. After some time, he wakes up and tries to get up, but his wounds are very deep. He sees some food balls in the mage's bag, so he tries to approach them and eats one. He feels some energy from this and becomes unconscious again. The next morning, when he wakes up, he is a little better than before, so he tries to get up. But his body is so weak that he again falls back and closes his eyes. A few days later, he can finally walk and reaches the mage's corpse to get his dagger. He looks toward the high mountain from where he falls and wonders how he survived falling through it. He wonders how long it has been since he is staying there, but he has to move on and look for his parents. But suddenly, he is shocked to hear someone's voice who asks him if he is awake. He turns behind to look for the person and thinks the corpse is talking to him. The voice asks him about his condition. He approaches the body and tries to touch it with the wooden stick. The voice asks him not to worry. The corpse won't be reanimating if he is afraid of it. He is relieved when later he realizes that he shouldn't trust the unknown voice, no matter how silky, smooth, and dignified it sounds. He asks the voice about who he is and if he was the one who saved him. The voice replies yes to his second person and says he will find the answer to his first question once he arrives at his dwelling. Arthur says he sounds pretty confident that he will even try to find him, and he replies that he is the only one who will be able to get him home from this place. He thinks about Ray, Alice, the twin horns, and his baby sibling. He wonders if they are all right or if they have reached Xyrus safely. He then calls the voice by Mr. Voice and asks if he can inconvenience him for direction so that he may grace him with his presence. She laughs and replies that he catches on quickly, but referring to a lady as Mr. is rude. He wonders how she knows his name, and she replies that she will show him. Suddenly, he feels a red light everywhere and covers his eyes to stay safe from it. Miss Voice checks the surrounding areas and recommends he should depart immediately since it will be a lot safer traveling while it's still light out. He follows her directions and thinks his body's condition gradually improved, leaving him with only a few aches here. But he enters the rock and Miss Voice instructs him to watch his steps. He steps on a rock, but it cracks and makes him fall toward the ground. He falls toward the bulk of light and soon strikes the ground at a weird place. He gets up, thinking she should have warned him that he would drop 2 stories down. He gets up and tries to walk, but this time he falls from some stairs and is shocked to see the thing in front of him. She looks like a monster and is glad to see Arthur in person, but he is shocked. She then walks toward him, and Arthur seems so scared of her. She asks him to close his mouth, otherwise bugs will fly into his mouth if he keeps it open that wide. He closes his mouth, but still is very scared of her. She grabs his hand and says it will take some time for her to open a dimensional rift strong enough to transport him to his home. She shows him many special plants that will be able to nourish him until then, and he is calm and thanks her for his help. He grabs a plant, thinking it looks fine, and can see his reflection in it. He thinks about his parents and gets sad thinking about her, and wonders if they are still alive. Suddenly he gets scared when Miss Voice appears behind him and asks him to eat another fruit that tastes better. He then sits with her, eats a fruit, and asks her if she has a name so he can address her. She tells them her name is Sylvia, and he asks her permission to ask some questions. She allows him, saying she may not be able to answer everything. They start their conversation, and with his initial fear of Sylvia's appearance slowly fading, he begins to ask her all of the questions that have been on his mind since waking up from the fall. He asks her where this place is, why she is there all alone, where she came from, and why she saved him, and many more questions of this type. She answers his first question, which is easy enough, and reveals that this place is a narrow zone between the Beast Meadows and the Forest of Elsha. No one knows of this place because she has been warding off anyone who comes close, although those cases are rare in the first place. Arthur is the first to enter into this domain, and he says she can call him Art, since his family calls him by this name. Sylvia says she will also call him Art from now on, and gives an answer to his second question, saying that she is here all alone, simply because she has no one left to be with. She has many enemies who desperately wish for something that she has, and her last battle with her enemies before she was able to escape left her with this wound. She saved him because his courage and sacrifice moved her, or perhaps she had simply grown lonely after that. She gets up and apologizes to him for the night, saying that her wound festers, and that she must be in good condition when she works on the dimensional rift tomorrow. He says her good night, and as the fearsome figure clad in dark armor walks away, he can't help but think how lonely she is. She also tells him that her sight is unable to reach exactly where they have gone, but his family and friends are safe, she tells him, in case he isn't sure. And Arthur was happy to hear they were all secure. He cried and smiled with the relief he got on hearing this, and thanked Sylvia, with all his heart after that. Sylvia and he spent hours talking about all sorts of things when she wasn't preparing the portal. But those hours bled into days, and those days into weeks. While they spent every moment in each other's company, Sylvia never spoke about her own life, and he slowly began to understand what sort of person this mysterious being was. In this time interval, he meditated on his core and thought Sylvia was the living embodiment of the phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover." Contrary to her trauma-inducing appearance, she was kind, gentle, patient, and warm. She called him and asked if he wanted to eat the fruit, since they were particularly savory and rarely grew elsewhere. Arthur thought she reminded him of his mother because she was gentle and kind to him. She also firmly scolded him when he was wrong, and he just remembered something unpleasant. There was a time when he had expressed his animosity toward the bandits, and they deserved worse deaths. If any of them made it out alive, he was determined that he would hunt them down. But Sylvia flicked him with her finger and threw him away. He got up and asked why she did this to him, and said he was not wrong in that those bandits deserved death. She chose not to save the mage he fell with for the same reason. However, letting his heart cloud with hatred and vengeance like this would only cause harm to himself. She asked him to continue proudly with his life. With his gaze forward, he would encounter misfortune again, but shouldn't let grief and rage corrode his mind. She instructed him to learn from them and face the future with a smile, because only then would he be truly victorious. She then affectionately asked him if she flicked him too hard and if it felt too hurt. Being lectured on morals and life by a figure that appeared to be the epitome of evil had oddly stricken him deeply. When he heard Sylvia's voice, he was lost in his thoughts, and she asked him why he wasn't eating the fruit. He smiled and said he was fine, and started eating the food. He observed that her wound was getting worse, and she asked him not to worry, because this wound festered from time to time. She stated that she understood that humans usually awakened around 12 or 13. She asked him how he formed his mana core and utilized mana more efficiently than many full-fledged mages. He bragged and said his parents said he was a genius, and she said, then perhaps she would be able to learn it. She asked them to meditate and absorb mana while moving and probably while fighting, if he was good enough. She got up and showed him her mana, and Arthur asked her how she did that. She stated that humans have a very linear mindset in regard to mana, and he had to start with a small portion and mindless movements, and work his way up from there. He followed her instructions, and said it was easier than done. She exclaimed that mana beasts learned to do this naturally, but since humans usually awakened much later, their bodies couldn't multitask. Considering the latter fact didn't apply to him, and if he practiced hard enough, then he should be able to succeed. Arthur smiled and said he would do his best. After that, he worked on the technique and Sylvia worked on the dimension portal. Suddenly he lost his balance and fell to the ground. He thought practicing this skill to its fullest essentially meant being able to fight proficiently, while still maintaining a steady inward flow of mana. He moved his wooden sword with the flow, and mana flowed through his hands and arms. He was happy, and told Sylvia that he did it, but was shocked to see that she was lying on the ground unconscious. He ran toward her to ask what had happened to her, but his feet touched her blood, which had spread all over the ground. He tried to move her using his mana, but she was so heavy that he couldn't do this. He was shocked to see that her wound had gotten worse so quickly. Meanwhile, the portal had opened, and he realized that her condition had worsened due to the portal. He remembered the good times they spent together, and was disappointed that her wound was worsening because she was creating the portal. He started crying because she did this all because of him, but he heard her voice saying he was irresponsible. But he started crying to see that she was dying for him. After that, he cried longer than he cared to admit. He cried for the first time, like the child he was on the outside. After some time, Sylvia asked him if he had calmed down a little, and said they didn't have much time left together, and she would hate it to be wasted with him blaming himself over this. He asked her how he couldn't blame himself when she was basically sacrificing herself so that he could meet his family. But Sylvia said he was doing her a favor by allowing her to leave this forsaken cave a bit faster. He called her name, and she exclaimed that her name didn't suit the form she had. Suddenly his body started shredding, and he was shocked that she had turned into a white dragon. She asked him if she looked like Sylvia, and he was surprised that she was a dragon. She replied that she was referred to as a .agon, but they had little time for idle chatter. Now that she was in this form, she must use her original form to finish this portal. But now that her veil is gone, then the enemies will soon come for her. She has created the portal and calls Arthur to listen to her carefully. She wants to say a few things to him before they part their ways. She gives him an egg-like thing, and it's not heavy, yet he feels he can barely hold on to it. Sylvia asks him to wrap that thing into her wing to conceal its aura. She asks him to bear with her, one more thing which makes him fall by pushing him behind. Suddenly, Arthur feels a change in his body, and his hands are turning red. Sylvia says that with this, everything will reveal itself when the time comes. He notices that she is closing her eyes, and asks her if she is okay, and she replies that she will open the portal now, and she doesn't have the time to make it go directly to his home. However, he will arrive somewhere near humans, and Arthur says he can't leave her there. Suddenly, they hear a noise from outside, and it looks like someone is trying to enter there. A creature comes there and advises her to cease her stubbornness and hand it over to him. He asks her to submit something, and he may heal her wound. Arthur observes that he looks similar to Sylvia's previous form, and he says she has already caused them quite a trouble after hiding. Sylvia talks to Arthur and says she has a bit of a confession to make. She reveals that she intentionally prolonged the transportation spell so that she could spend more time with him. She won't ask him to forgive her, but she has one more selfish request and asks him to call her grandma just this once. He smiles, grabs her wing and asks her to come with him. He doesn't know what she did, but everything is frozen now. He asks her to leave this place together. Sylvia closes her eyes and says, "They can't do this." And with this she says farewell and pushes him toward the portal. He tries to stop her, but can't, and sees her for the last time. He also calls her grandma, and she closes her eyes in relief and thanks him for fulfilling her request. He is transported through the portal and reaches a place like a forest. He looks at his surroundings and is sad that Sylvia has gone. He cries for her so loud that his voice can be heard all around. His mind swam with memories of his nearly 4 months with Sylvia. Sylvia had treated him like her own blood. For a time that seemed both long and short, she taught him the things he had lacked since coming to this world. Suddenly the portal again opens, and he hurriedly looks backward to see if she is there. He can hear her voice, and she asks him to listen to her carefully, saying it means she has shown him what she actually is. He observes that she managed to leave a message for him earlier. She says she knows he will be frustrated, and is nowhere near ready for the truth. His body is that of a boy who has barely passed 4, and his mana core has already progressed to the dark red stage. As a small parting gift, she has infused her unique will onto him, and his future development as a mage will depend on how well he is able to use her gift. She can imagine what he may be feeling right now: sorrow, anger, and guilt. But she asks him to remember that she may have a family to look out for, and a purpose to fulfill in this life. Her only wish for him is to embrace the joys and innocence of childhood, and become a man of which both her parents and she can be proud. When his monocore is past the white stage, she will hear from her once more. At that time, she will explain everything. Until then, she bids him farewell and called him King Grey. Arthur is shocked that she knows about his past life and name. After that, questions continued to pester him, long after Sylvia's voice disappeared, and he wondered how long she had known about his identity. One thing is sure, he focused only on training for the sake of revenge, and this life would hardly be different from the last one. He can only move forward for now, but first, he has to find out where he is. He uses his mana core, learned by Sylvia, and runs here and there to learn about the place he reaches for the tree branch, and thinks his vision is restricted even with mana. But one thing is clear: he is deep within the Elsur forest, even just barely being able to use the mana rotation that Sylvia taught him. He is able to use magic for a lot longer, and he can't help but wonder how he ended up there. Sylvia said that he would arrive near other humans, but no matter how, he will just keep looking around. He is getting pretty good at this tree-traveling business. Suddenly, he hears a human's voice from the side, and he turns toward him, thinking they can hopefully take him with them. He goes down from the tree and can see a carriage going to a side. Many people are staying there, and one of them asks others to get ready, and they are only a few days away from leaving this forest. They are elves, and they are talking about a little girl. They have kidnapped her and are talking about selling her. Arthur finds out that they are slave traders and can see an unconscious girl with them. He had no idea how those elves managed to get hands on forest hounds, but he knew that getting one of them would be his best bet out of the forest. As for those slave traders, with all the things that happened to him lately, it looked like he would finally be able to let off some steam. He jumps from the tree because dealing with those slave traders first is the best course of action, but he can't strike immediately. Attacking all 4 of them head-on would be suicide, even for him, so he decides to follow them. He waits for the best time and gathers his strength to make his move, when their guards are down. After a few days, he finds out the right time and hits a hound with a walnut shell. The hound starts barking, and a man asks the others to shut him up before they wake up everything in the forest. Without a weapon, Arthur is forced to utilize a technique from his previous life, a technique he is not even sure would work in this world. One of them goes to the hounds, asks them to shut them up, and gives them a piece of meat. In the meantime, Arthur reaches him quickly and attacks him with his full mana core. He has successfully defeated one of them and takes out his dagger, thanking him for the weapon. On the other hand, his companion is waiting for him. Since the hounds have been quiet for so long, he goes to see him, when Arthur appears behind him and also kills him, using his dagger as expected. Fighting is a lot hard and tiresome in this body, and he should finish this quickly while the last 2 can see. Suddenly their companions come to look for them and call where they are. One of them feels someone's presence there and hurriedly reacts to take him down. But Arthur's speed is greater than him, and he quickly passes through him by attacking his legs. He cries in pain when his companion comes to see him and asks him to stop. The child says he's a mage. He is shocked to see that the man is also a mage, and says they don't want to accidentally kill the golden egg that just landed in front of them, and he might even fetch them more than the little girl elf. He appears from behind, and is about to attack him, but Arthur moves swiftly and dodges his attack. He then hits him on his face and makes him angry. He fills the dagger with his mana core and tries to attack him, but he grabs the knife. He laughs, says he surely has some cute tricks, and asks him to catch his weapon, but he throws it toward him. Arthur dodges his attack and thinks he is faster than he expected. He falls to the ground badly and is about to approach him by calling him a bag of gold. He grabs him from his leg and asks him to give up, saying he can't do anything with his little body. He thinks condensing mana like a blade seems to behave similarly to wind magic in this world, and he tries to use his condensing technique to free himself. He causes an explosion there, and the man's hand burns badly, and he says he will now kill him. Arthur picks up the dagger and appears from behind, and the man says he will kill him, and he doesn't care if he has to sell his corpse, but Arthur stabs the dagger in his neck and kills him too, while one of them is still alive and requests him not to kill him. He looks toward him with teary eyes and thinks the little girl also requested them to leave her. He then goes inside and asks her to come outside, since they are safe now, and she can go home. He then closes her eyes and takes her away from the carriage and the corpses when they are at a good distance. He takes out her blinder. She thanks him for saving her, and he is about to leave her. She grabs him and asks how she can abandon her in the woods. Arthur says he also wants to go home, and those bad guys won't chase her anymore. Besides, elves are generally safe in this forest, and she replies that beasts are only scared of adults, and she is just a child. Her parents said that kids would get eaten by hounds or tree golems, and he asked her if she knew how long it would take to get to where she lives from there. But he is shocked to hear that she doesn't know where she lives, and he asks her to stay there, and he is going to gather some supplies for them. After that, he salvages what he can for the journey ahead and removes their clothes. He thinks it's a shame they can't take the carriage, but it might be for the best and also frees the hounds. He can only hope the elves have something that can take him back to the human kingdom. He goes to the girl and gives her some clothes he found inside the carriage. She thanks him for the clothes, and Arthur smiles and says they are going home. As they walked in the vague direction she pointed, he learned more about the elf child. Her name is Tesha, and she asks him how he ended up in the Elsha forest. He tells her the whole story, saying that he has just separated from his family and has come from the human kingdom. She asks him if it is true that all male humans are perverts and have more than one wife, and her grandpa has told her that. She then exclaims that there are perverts among elves too, and Arthur asks her if she really knows the meaning of this word. She reveals that she spends much time with her caretakers and grandpa. Since her mom and dad are busy, they spend a good time there. And Tesha tells him that he will probably be given a mentor to train under once she is awakened. The education system seems a bit more undiscriminating in Eleanor if everyone's assigned a private mentor. Upon awakening at night, they cooked a rabbit for dinner, and she asked him what had happened to those bad guys who took her. He replied that they had run into a rather unfortunate accident. She asked him if they would try to find her again, and he promised her that they wouldn't ever see them again. After some time, Arthur asked her to get some sleep, and he would keep guard outside. After that, he thought he wanted to use this time to figure out what this will Sylvia had left for him. Tesha came to him and asked if he was sure he didn't need a night of sleep. He replied that he wasn't sleepy, and Tesha went inside sadly. She said beasts would more likely appear if they noticed him out there because they would see he was a kid. Therefore, she proposed that he should keep guard inside the tent, and Arthur observed that she was scared. She again clarified to him that this was for their safety and not because she was scared. He asked her to sleep, and after some time she fell asleep. While he sat there, he also fell asleep for a moment, and after that, they continued their journey with unfamiliar surroundings and time quickly passing as the only indicators of their progress. After Tesha's initial desperation and fears had passed, it was obvious she had no idea how to interact with him. He would admit that worries about his family and impatience to get back home didn't leave him in the best mood, but he had to fulfill a responsibility before going home. However, the thing that made the journey almost unbearable was the agonizing pains coming from his mana core that struck unpredictably. He felt so much pain, and Tesha came to him and asked if he was all right, and he replied to her that he was fine. The same night he again felt the pain in his chest, and the next day, when they were walking near a tree, a pair of hounds attacked them. He just showed them his mana core, and they ran away afraidly. The pain came to him more frequently, and he didn't tell Tesha because she would be only worried. At night, he got a good night's sleep, thinking it might relieve his pain. Days passed, and Tessia appeared to recognize more and more of their indistinguishable surroundings. However, their pace slowed as Tessia's body couldn't keep up with the toll of constant travel. She was so tired that she started crying, so he carried her load too. As for him, despite strengthening his body with mana, the pains continued to grow, and it became harder to hide them from the worried elf. She rushed toward him and asked what had happened to him, and he made an excuse, saying that he needed to go to the bathroom. The next morning, she asked him permission to call him Art, just like his family does, since they were close friends now. Arthur said he didn't mind if she called him Art, but she thought he was being rude, so he respectfully said he would be most honored if Tessia could refer to this humble countryside boy by Art. She said he was talking like an old man, and Arthur said it was better than being a crybaby who couldn't even pee by herself without being surrounded by him with his closed eyes and ears shut. She shouted at him and asked him to shut up. Suddenly she told him that she saw something, and Art also saw something too. He saw moss, leaves, fog, trees, and many trees. He thought despite their mental age gap, they had gotten very close. After that, she tapped many trees and told him that they had finally arrived at her home. A portal opened there, and she called Art to follow her, and they entered her home. He entered the gate, fell to the ground, and thought he hated these teleportation gates. Tessia asked him to wake up. Since they had reached there, he was shocked to see a big kingdom in front of him, where there were many elves. Pristine was the only word that came to his mind after watching this, and even that didn't do the scene in front of him justice. Suddenly, a green wind appeared in front of him, and he took out his dagger, thinking they were about to attack him, but they were guards who welcomed the royal princess in the kingdom. Art asked her if she was the princess, and she nodded while bluffing. One of them said they arrived as soon as they noticed the royal teleportation gate had been used. In the meantime, the king and queen also reached there and inquired about her health. The king's name was Aldwin Irilith, and the queen's name was Muriel Irilith. Virion Arilith was a name noted in every history book, and he was the former king who led the last war against the humans of the Sapan kingdom. He was scared to see them, so he looked at Tessia affectionately and asked her to go and greet her parents. He wondered if his mother and father would react like this when they saw him. The king bowed before him and thanked him for helping their daughter, and as a small gesture of gratitude for helping Tessia arrive home safely, they requested him to accompany them to their home. He said he could rest, and then told them what happened there. Art noticed his tone was gentle, but his eyes showed that this wasn't an offer, but an order. He bowed before them and said he was honored by getting their request. Suddenly, Tessia grabbed his hand and asked him to go with him, since there was a lot she wanted him to see after learning that she was a princess. He somewhat expected an impressive castle, but this was beyond his expectations. She took him inside the castle, and he wondered what sort of corny novel he had wound up inside. The queen ordered the maid to take the child, get him washed up, and into a room to rest. Arthur thanked them, but said he wanted to explain what had happened first. After some time they sat at a dining table where they all wanted to listen to him. He stood up and introduced himself as Arthur Lewin, from a humble town in the kingdom of Sapan. It was an honor to be in the presence of the royal family. His introduction was a little over the top, but the discussion wouldn't progress if they treated him like a child. The king noted that despite Arthur claiming to be of humble origin, he seemed rather mature and well-educated, and now wanted to hear what had happened. Arthur recounted his journey, starting with a vague account, stating that he had gotten separated from his family after running into bandits. It wasn't a lie, but a half-truth, and inevitable as the story progressed. When he mentioned running into their daughter, the atmosphere shifted. The king got angry upon hearing about slave traders and said he should have known it was humans. He stated that slave trading was a profession, not a race, and the guards drew their swords at this disrespect, but the grandfather forbade them. He asked Arthur if he saw the slave traders take his daughter, and if he negotiated with them, or begged for their mercy. Arthur replied that while he was a child, he was also a mage, and he had eliminated the slave traders and rescued the granddaughter. A guard approached him angrily and asked how he dared to spout such lies in front of the king, but the grandfather stared at him. He was scared and moved behind Arthur. Arthur stood up and said, regardless of whether anyone believed him or not, Princess Tessia had been returned safely, and all he wished for now was to return back to his family in Sapan. Tessia stood up, asked if he was leaving too soon, and called him Art, while the king and queen stared at each other to see their frankness. After learning history, Arthur exclaimed that he didn't think it was appropriate for a human to be inside this kingdom for too long, and his priority was to make sure his family was safe and let them know that his family was also okay. The king said that regardless of their two kingdoms' pasts, he had saved their daughter and taken the trouble to accompany her back to them. This entitled him to a befitting reward, but unfortunately the teleportation gate linked with the Seipan kingdom was only accessible once every 7 years during the summit conference between the three races. It would be another 5 years until the gate would open. However, they would be happy to send a group of guards to escort him back home safely. He also wanted to expand their hospitality, and said some of them were tolerant enough, but too many still held grudges against humans from the war long ago. He asked him to make himself at home, and they would have his escorts prepared by tomorrow morning. Arthur thanked them for their kindness. He then went to a restroom, took a bath, and during his bath he felt his chest pain getting worse. After that he grabbed the egg, wondered what he should do now, and wished Sylvia were there. Someone knocked at his door, and it was Tessia, watching him angrily. She then struck his chest, saying he talked to her family coldly and was going back already. He told her that he wasn't being cold, but respectful, because they were the king and queen of this kingdom. He then shouted at her, asking why she hadn't told him she was the princess. She didn't want him to leave, and said he was the first friend she had. He cheered her up and asked her to show him around the castle. She then took him to her favorite place in the castle, and if he stayed there until spring, he could see all of the flowers bloom. She exclaimed that he could at least see the globies harvesting and showed him pretty flowers. Suddenly, he felt someone's attack from behind, and he put Sylvia down and grabbed the knife. He then dodged the attack of the attacker, but was shocked to see that it was the grandfather who attacked them. He shouted at him and asked if he was just going to kill his own granddaughter. The grandfather replied that it might have left her a small welt, but he doubted that the toy he was holding could kill anyone. Arthur was shocked to see that he had just been tricked, and the grandfather appreciated him for his great reaction and instincts. He never thought he would catch and use his little present against him. His mana usage was mediocre at best, but he could see how he was able to kill a few slave traders. He thought this old man had a lost screw, and Tessia asked her grandpa to stop teasing him. The grandfather said she should know why he arrived, and Arthur also wanted to know why. He stated that it had been a while since he met someone interesting, and he gave him a wooden sword, saying they would see what he was made of. Tessia tried to stop him, but he released his mana core and asked Arthur to fight him with all he had. Arthur grabbed the sword and tried to attack him, but the grandfather dodged his attack and appeared from behind. He was about to hit him from behind when Arthur blocked the attack with his sword, but the grandfather was so strong compared to him. Arthur jumped from behind to attack him, but the grandfather punched him and his sword fell to the ground. He again grabbed the sword and rushed toward him, but even with his mana and minimizing his movements, he couldn't keep up with him. The old man tried to attack him from behind while he looked for a chance to land an attack on him. He then jumped upon him faster than before, and his sword was about to touch the head of the old man when he pushed him away. Arthur fell to the ground, and Tessia ran toward him. The old man smiled and said, "It seems like he deserves this for being arrogant, but to think he would actually be able to land a hit." Tessia seemed angry with him, and Grandpa asked him to start the second round. Tessia punched him and said he had bullied Art enough and should have gone easier on him. The grandpa said he was afraid that he would have been the only one bullying him if he had gone easier on him. Arthur smiled and said he was honored. The esteemed elder Varian thought so highly of him, and the old man seemed surprised by his words. The old man offered him the opportunity to become his disciple. Tessia was shocked by his demand, and the old man asked him what he thought of him. Arthur asked him if he was serious, and said he was a human, and if humans were allowed to stay in this kingdom. The old man said, "No one will dare try and kick him out." While he was under tutelage, he knew Art had realized that he was already better than other kids, and he could teach him something even the most capable mages back in Sapin couldn't. Art refused his offer, saying he couldn't, not when he didn't even know how his parents, who didn't even know whether he was dead or alive, were doing. The old man asked him if he allowed him to communicate with them, to let them know they were okay, and if it would be enough for him. Arthur asked him what he meant by that, and the old man asked him to wait, and asked the maid to get Tessia washed up and into bed. After that, the old man realized he was rather impatient, which related to what he sensed earlier during their little spa. He asked him if he had been having bouts of searing pain where his manacor was, and those bouts were coming more frequently. Art was shocked and asked how he knew that, but the old man said, "More than how he knows, it's the fact that he is not aware of the reason for his pain that's a problem." He asked him if he knew about a beast will. Beast will was a term he had never heard before, but he immediately thought back to when Sylvia stuck him at his core. The old man said he was sure he knew or had encountered a few mana beasts already, and they were classified as classes. The old man said, a beast powerful enough to be categorized as Class A or higher gains the ability to pass on their will or inheritability down once to their offspring or a person they are bound to. He wouldn't pry how he stumped upon such a powerful beast, but at this stage, the power residing within him was doing more harm than good. Art said he knew all about this and asked if he had a beast will. The old man revealed he was a beast tamer, and it was a title he could obtain once he had fully conquered the monstrous beast inside of him. The old man said he knew how important it was to return to his family, but doing so right now came at a grave risk. He touched him and said, the power from his beast will be too potent for his immature body to handle, and if it is not controlled soon, then the power he has obtained will destroy his body from the inside out. The next morning, he felt a heavy sensation pressing down on his body. When he fell asleep, he felt like a monster, the personification of his worries and the expectations placed on him haunting him even in his sleep. Suddenly, he felt Tesha on him, and she asked him to wake up. He called her a shadow monster and asked her to give him 5 more minutes. She got angry with him and asked how he dared to call her a monster. He got up, and Tesha said his hair looked funny, and asked him if it was true that he was going to stay there. He replied that they would surely know after the trip with Elder Virion, and called her Princess Tessia. She pinched his back and asked him not to call her princess, but only to call Tess. He agreed to call her Tess and asked her to leave the room, saying he had to take a shower and get ready. After that, when he came downstairs, he heard the king's voice and asked his father not to reside as a human within the kingdom. The queen also agreed with him and said she would always be grateful to the boy for saving Tesha, but allowing a human to stay there went against all traditions. The old man said he liked the boy, so there was no need to say more. Their daughter seemed to approve of his decision as well. The king asked him to reconsider his decision, but the old man asked him to stop and said he would be under his direct guidance and ensure everyone in the kingdom knew that Arthur listened to the conversation and thought the old man could be trusted. The old man saw Art and asked him to hurry, since they had to go now. After that, he asked the old man how long they had left to go, and called him Gramps. The old man was surprised and asked if he was uncomfortable with him now, and Arthur said they would have to see how today goes. His mysterious friend. Soon Tasha fell asleep on his shoulders, and the grandpa said she woke up so early today, bugging him about him. He looks at her affectionately, and says that being the only princess of this kingdom caused her to grow up in a lonely environment. She has been hurt too many times by both adults and even children pretending to be her friend. Eventually, she grew cold and distant, building a wall constantly around herself. In the short time that he has seen her with him, she has shown him more smiles and laughs than she has in the last few years. He thanks Art for that, and is shocked at what the old man just said. After some time, their carriage stops at a place, and Tasha asks the grandpa if they have reached their destination. They reach outside a house, and Art wonders who this mysterious friend is to make the former king come all the way to this rural area. Suddenly, the grandpa kicks the door and asks his friend to come outside. An old lady comes outside angrily and says her ears still work perfectly. The grandpa introduces her to Raina Dark-San, an old friend and a very special deviant who can help him. Art greets her respectfully, and she replies that they haven't got all day now, asking them to come inside immediately. Art thinks being a deviant means she is similar to his mother, whose magic doesn't fall into the categories of the 4 essential elements. He wonders how she will be able to help him. He asks her if her magic can help him reach his parents, and she tells the elder Virion that he has a soft side for the boy. She says she is a diviner, and magic of this nature varies from mage to mage, but she is pretty capable. This means that there is someone who can hide from him if she chooses to pry. For example, she knows that Arthur is so unique, and in fact, she can't even see parts of his life. But these eyes have seen pieces of both his past and future. However, he is not there for her clairvoyant abilities, but is here to see his parents, as in, let them know he is alive. She asks him to lean forward, keep his eyes on the basin of water, and focus on the image of his parents as clearly and detailed as possible. Once he can see them in the water, he will be able to speak to them. He remembers his mum's glowing red hair and sun-kissed complexion radiating gentle warmth, her thin brows always knitted together, worrying about him. He remembers his dad with his intense blue gaze and goofy smile that brightens even the dullest days. His silly quips and simple nature at home are severely at odds with his charisma as a leader and fighter. He hopes that they both are alive. He opens his eyes and is shocked to see them in a house Elise has made a dish and asks Ray to dig into it. Ray likes beef stew and asks her what special occasion she has made it for. She replies, "There's nothing special, and it's just been a while since she cooked for him." After moving there, he helps to sit on the chair, while she sadly thinks beef stew used to be his and Arthur's favorite dish. She is sad thinking about him, since they believe he has died. Suddenly they hear Arthur's voice in their mind, and he calls both of them. They look at each other shockingly, and the spoon falls from Ray's hand. When Arthur says he is alive, he exclaims that they are probably astonished that they hear his voice inside his head, and he will explain all that later. But for now, he just wants them to know that he is alive and safe. Back to the time when Elise found out that Arthur had died, she cried a lot, and he told her that he managed to survive the fall off the cliff. Everyone was grieved at that time, and Arthur asked them to keep this a secret, but he is currently staying in the kingdom of Elenwa with the elves. He knows it must have been hard for them, and it has been hard for him, but he is glad they are okay. He hopes that they don't blame each other for what happened, and he is proud of what he did back then. If he could go back in time, he would do it again. He wishes he could go to them, but that might be a little hard right now, and it seems he has a sort of illness that he needs to get treated. He is not in danger, but he needs to get treated before returning home. While he is talking, they are thinking about when they return from their journey. Arthur says he is not sure when the next time he can reach out like this will be. They move to a new city and into a new house, and Arthur tells them that there is a mage there who is a deviant like his mother, and she is the one who is allowing them to be able to hear his voice. He promises Ray to keep practicing magic and fighting while he is there recovering, and asks him not to be surprised if he can beat him in a match the next time they meet. Until then, he has to keep the mother and the baby safe. Ray and Elise are still shocked, and then they happily hug each other, thinking about their son. Arthur asks them to take care until he returns, while his face is filled with tears. He then tells the old man he is ready to be his disciple. After that, they return to the castle, where the king and queen welcome them, but don't say anything when they are about to enter the castle. The king blocks his path and says that years of being a king have made him a bit old-fashioned and stubborn. The queen also puts her hand on his shoulder and tells him that the king wants to apologize to him for earlier, and asks him to accept the apology and consider this place his own. The king says he is his daughter's savior and his father's first disciple, so he will properly welcome him once again. They shake hands, and Arthur thanks him for his generosity. Suddenly, Tesha interrupts them and says, if he is really sorry to Arthur, then he has to let them play outside. She wants to show him around the city. After some time, she gets ready and asks him to go with her, and they both go to look around the city. She shows him many things in the market. Suddenly, they collide with a boy, and he rudely says he has human germs on him. He makes fun and says he can't belong here, just because Elder Virion favors him a bit. Tess asks him to ignore them and go from there, but the boy says he wants to mess with him. The boy tells her that he applauds her kindness, but it is beneath her level to be with this human common. He asks her permission to escort her. He tells his name, Farath. Ifsar and Arthur, surprisingly, ask him if he is really Farath. Ifsar Firth brags and says he has even heard of his genius, and that he has awakened recently while he is still so young. Art makes fun of his name and calls him Ibisor, making him angry while they laugh at him. He then bows before him and says he had no such clue that he was in the presence of such an inspiring genius, and he will remember to give him proper respect. He then asks him to excuse them and leaves, but Ferrith feels humiliated and asks him to stop and asks if he thinks he didn't see through his sarcasm. Art thinks he is not quite as dense as he thought, and he challenges him to a duel for the pride of the Ifsar house. Tesha interrupts him and asks how he dares to initiate a duel with the disciple of Elder Virion. He may be of noble blood, but he should still know his place. He apologizes to her, but says his father taught him never to let anyone trample on his pride. He asks Arthur to accept the duel or retreat with humiliation, and his decision will also reflect on his mentor. Arthur wonders if a duel is such a serious thing there, and Ferreth exclaims, he will take his silence as an acceptance, and asks Princess Tessia to officiate this duel. Tessia looks toward him, but he seems quiet. She announces the start of the duel. Many people gather around to see them while fighting, and Ferreth asks him to prepare himself. He is still bragging. When Arthur reaches him, he punches him with his full might and makes him fall to the ground. Arthur then asks him if the duel is over, and Tessia happily grabs his hand and moves from there. Arthur couldn't help but grow to appreciate this little princess more and more, and the rest of the day wasn't quite as fun as playing with Ferreth. They went to a library, which was refreshing and allowed him to get his mind off things. They also visit a mage and then go to a large tree. Tessia asks him if he is nervous about his training starting tomorrow, but he stays quiet. He remembers the old man saying he doesn't know how he taught so far, but he assures him that his lessons won't be easy. He asks him not to mind the pain from his mana core, and the assimilation process used by beast tamers has often been compared to submerging his body in boiling tar. He will be stuck there in a foreign land without family comfort, and even his daily life will become arduous. However, if he can endure, the payoff will be enormous, and he asks if he is ready. He then tells Tessia that he is excited about tomorrow and has come a long way to get to where he is now. He is excited about training and seeing his parents. He can't wait for what the future has in store for him. 3 years later, Tessia wakes him up one morning and says they are going to be late. She uses her mana to twist his ankle, and he gets up in pain. He asks her if she can't find a gentler way to wake him up, but she says he doesn't always wake up when she asks nicely. Besides, he should feel grateful that such a pretty girl like her is waking him up, but she gets angry when he says that the maids are prettier than her. On their way downstairs, she asks him if he really thinks maids are prettier than her. But the old man interrupts them and says it took them long enough to come to him. He asks them to get ready for their lesson. It is revealed that there exist 4 basic elements and their higher forms, and these higher elements, ice, gravity, lightning, and sound, can only be controlled by a mage that has gone beyond mastery of their foundational elements. They call them deviants, and dwarves can only manipulate earth and fire, but elves possess a much higher affinity to these 2 elements. Their distinct trait lies in the fact that all dwarves can mold and bend metal, while talented dwarves can control fire and earth to such a high degree that they are able to conjure and manipulate magma. Elves are limited to water, wind, and earth elements, but have much higher affinity than humans. In rare cases, elves can also produce a particular deviant type capable of controlling plants. However, elves aren't able to produce mages that can manipulate the higher forms of water, wind, and earth. Human mages possess the ability to manipulate any 4 of the basic elements, and they're also the only race capable of producing deviants in any of those elements, along with anomalies that cannot be categorized in any of the elements, like emitters or healers. For example, there exists a subtle power balance among their 3 races, taking into account population, overall inherited affinity to elements, and diversity in mages. He then asks the old man if this explanation is good enough, and he replies that it's just passable. Tessia raises her hand for a question and says she knows that this whole assimilation process is meant to get Arthur's body ready to handle this beast's will, and asks if it wouldn't be better to have him train his body physically while using magic like her. Arthur thinks he has known all along his lessons beforehand, but the difference in races really has shown over these 3 years. While humans were considered talented if they awakened in their late teen years. But it wasn't surprising for elves. Children could awaken as soon as 10. For Tessia, it had happened even earlier, at the tender age of 9. The old man asks her if she is angry that she is the only one getting beat up while training. Since then, she has been training her conjuring skills with a tutor, while learning to fight from her grandfather. She will be a monster in the future. And the old man tells her what Arthur has been doing for 3 years is basically fusing his bones, muscles, and organs with his mana. He can assure her that his body will be stronger and more resilient once this is over than a veteran warrior. She makes her fun, saying how he can be so sensitive when she hits him. The grandpa says it seems like 3 years of fusion hasn't been enough to sap away her energy, and asks him if he is ready. He states that he will be a true beast tamer after today, unlike lucky adventurers who merely use their beast's will like tools. He is going to ignite his mana core by inserting a large amount of his own mana, and he will feel a bit warm, but it shouldn't be too bad. Arthur feels so much pain in the process, and there is an explosion that pushes both of them away. The old man is shocked at what happened to him. Since he never expected this reaction, they rush toward him, but he is laid on the ground. They inquire about his condition, and he replies that he is fine. The old man says he knows that he has his own reason for not telling him till now, but he has to ask him one more time. He asks him what sort of beast gave its will to her, and he replies that she was a dragon. The old man is shocked to see a real dragon tamer in his life. After that, he takes him to his room, asks how he is feeling at the moment, and asks the same question. The last thing he remembers before falling unconscious is going crazy, and he says he can trust them to keep this a secret. The old man reveals that the date of his departure has just been set for 4 months from now, and he gets up shockingly, because he thought it wouldn't be for another 2 years. The old man reveals that an interracial tournament among the 3 kingdoms' youth that was in the work has finally been confirmed. The portals in the Zero City of Sapan will be open to both the Illinois Kingdom and the Kingdom of Darv during this time. He is happy at first, and then asks if this is the reason Tesha is not there so he can tell him about this. The old man asks him not to worry about her, and he knows he has been checking in on his parents these past few years through Reina, but now he will finally be able to see them in person. He is happy and sad simultaneously, because 4 months are pretty soon, and the old man says he will make his wish for these 4 months to be over more quickly. Now that he has finished his assimilation, his training will get even harder. He then asks him to get some rest, and he will break it to Tesha gently, and he is sad about thinking 4 months suddenly. He looks toward the stone, and is shocked to see that it is about to crack. He wonders if Sylvia's stone is about to break, and approaches it quickly. Suddenly the stone breaks and something pops out of him. Arthur is watching it, shockingly. He then grabs the mini creature and stares at him for a long time. He asks him if he is also a dragon, but can't understand its language. He seems happy to know it's a dragon, but suddenly it bites on his arm. It gives him a deep mark on his arm and calls Arthur Mama. It then hugs him and does all the cute things a cute baby does to its mother. She is a female dragon who can talk inside his mind and asks her to call him Papa. Since he is a boy, he pats her and says he will call her Sylvia, after his mother, and he can feel she likes her name. It seems like the mark she gave him isn't as simple as it looks, and it feels like this thing is actually connecting him to the little dragon. He thinks he is just 8 years old, but he has a tattoo and also a father. He falls asleep, but sometimes he suddenly wakes up after feeling someone's presence. Tesha grabbed Sylvia and asked who she was, but it was so cute, he ignores her questions and gets back to his sleep again. The following day, he tells her about Sylvia, and that she can communicate with him with his mind. She calls him so lucky, and wishes if she could communicate with her, then she would like her too. Arthur said she would like her if she stopped looking at her as though she were a predator. She then called the grandpa and asked him to see Arthur's new pet. He was shocked to see a dragon kid on his head. He said he would die early if he kept getting shocked like this. After explaining to Virion what had happened and where Sylvia had come from, he learned that beings like Sylvia would usually only hatch in the presence of their kin. They tried to think of why she might have hatched in front of him, but the only reason they could think of was that he had fully activated Sylvia's will yesterday. He asked the old man if he needed to hide her once they went back, since most people wouldn't know that she was such a powerful being. The old man said he should be okay, just faking it off as a rare mana beast. However, he had other things to worry about, and said they had held back on strengthening his mana core during this assimilation, but now that he had fully awakened, they should get him to train both his core and the new dragon will. Arthur asked him what he needed to do for this, but the old man smirked and said he had found the best way to access the first stage of his beast will, on top of strengthening his mana core, was to engage in combat constantly. Arthur was happy to hear about fighting, but the old man said it made sense that fighting a fellow beast tamer as he used these stages against him would help him even more. He couldn't understand what the old man had just said, but was soon shocked that he had used his beast tamer skill and turned into a beast. He then asked him to fight with him. With all he had, it was revealed that the beast tamer mages are capable of harnessing the unique ability inherited from a mana beast. The first stage is known as the acquire phase, and it is when the beast tamer is able to borrow their beast's inherited strengths. But it's only at the second stage, the integrate phase, when the mage can truly utilize their beast's unique ability and characteristics. However, Virion, who had only unlocked this second stage after decades of studying his beast, Will, was now able to utilize the deadly prowess of a shadow panther. He called Arthur and asked him to pay attention when he sneaked behind him, and he wondered if he could sneak up on him. Even after warning him suddenly, he disappeared in front of him and put a hand on his shoulder in the blink of an eye. Arthur tried to react, but when he turned behind there was no one, and he appeared from behind. Arthur surrendered and said he couldn't even react to his speed at this level, and his form was trauma-inducing. The old man returned to his original form and said it's not without its flaws, but using the integrate phase still took a bit out of him. Arthur said his movements were one thing, but he couldn't feel his presence, even when he was behind him. The old man grabbed his wooden sword and said, "Shadow and panthers are able to manipulate wind and sound to achieve this effect." Instinctually, he gave him the sword and said they would now actually start the training. After that, days quickly passed for him, completely immersed in training. Through Virian's guidance and his own insights, he was able to access the first stage of his dragon's will. He also taught him to conceal the presence of his beast will in front of other mages. If he wasn't strengthening his mana core by studying Sylvia Dragon Will, he was sparring against Virian. Luckily, the assimilation process allowed his body to keep up with constant training and conditioning. In his downtime, he spent as much time as he could embracing the joys and innocence of childhood like Sylvia had wished for him. 4 months passed, and his departure date finally came. Tesha was sad about his departure. Spending every day together these last few years made breaking the news of his approaching departure that much harder on Tesha. After that, he used Grandma Sylvia's featherworks to hide the presence of Sylvia's mark. The grandpa came to him and said the carriage was waiting for him and it was time for him to go. He gave him a locket adorned with the Ralph House crest to help him navigate the forest. He thanked him for everything, and the grandpa said he could always just find another princess to lead him back. Tesha got angry and pulled his beard, and he told her it was a joke. He promised her they would see each other again, and with the grandpa teaching her, he expected her to be stronger than him the next time they met. He hugged her and said he would miss her, but she started crying loudly and said she would miss him too. He then said goodbye to everyone and boarded the carriage. When he entered the carriage, some elves were already present, and one of them asked him if he had finally been kicked out of the kingdom. Arthur asked him who he was, and he shouted at him and said he was the noble that he had beaten unfairly by defying the customs of the duel. He called him a foolish human, and said he should know that a true duel is meant to demonstrate magic, and the challenger always strikes first. Arthur seemed to recognize him and asked if he was Iviza, but he again shouted at him and said he was Firuth Ifsar, the heir of the noble Ifsar family. He may have been defeated underhandedly while a naive child, but if they fought again, he could beat him. Suddenly, Arthur grabbed his hand and said it was nice to see him. He also apologizes to him for bullying him back then. Ferth gets quiet, and a girl says he can just call him Fapi, like they all do. Ferth gets angry with her and asks her not to tell him that after a long journey. They have finally reached the dimensional portal, and Arthur thinks he can finally see his mum and dad. After a long time, he has entered the human world, and things are the same as they were 3 years ago. He then goes outside his home and asks Sylvie if she is ready to see his parents. He knocks at the door and thinks about the past 3 years. He had nearly died, had lost someone important, had also killed some people, and had trained for his life. But none of these things were as nerve-wracking as this moment. He hears a little girl's voice from inside, but she is an old lady, and asks how she can help him. He introduces himself as Arthur Lewin, and is informed that his family currently resides in this manor. A little girl asks him who he is, when he hears Alice's voice from behind, and she calls the girl by the name Eleanor, and asks what she is doing there. She asks her to greet everyone who knocks at the door, but she is surprised to see Arthur there. The bowl falls from his hand, and Arthur asks her if Eleanor is his sister, and starts crying with joy. He then greets his mother, and she also greets him while crying. They hugged each other, and Elise said she knew his voice was his, and she was happy that his baby was at home. Now, Eleanor starts crying after seeing them, and asks her mother not to cry. Ray also rushes toward the house after hearing about his arrival. He hugs them from behind and starts crying. Everyone cried at this sad moment, and the family reunited. After a long time, Elise asks him how he is feeling, and he tells them that he has an illness. So she asks him if he has been fully treated. He replies that he is fine, and Ray says she is asking him 100 questions at a time, besides just one look, and she can tell how big and strong their son has gotten. Elise asks Elena to come there and say hi to her big brother, and she is surprised at this. She then approaches them, and Elise says he is the brother in the story's mummy, and Daddy tell her before bedtime. She greets him and calls him big brother, and he also greets her and says it's nice to meet her. Finally, after getting settled, he spent some time explaining everything from the beginning while he trusted his family. He chose to leave out Sylvia explaining his survival from the fall off the cliff as a combination of luck and his body's unconscious use of magic to protect him. From there, he continued about finding Tesha and spending time recovering in the kingdom of Elenoir. Ray asks him about his little friend, and he replies that when he was traveling, he stumbled into a manor beast's den with Sylvie's mother flying from an injury. He couldn't do anything for the mother, but he has cared for this one since then. Elise asks him if he is sure that he is all healed now, and that there is no chance of him getting that illness again. He laughs and says she doesn't need to worry about him anymore, and it has more to do with the instability of his mana core from awakening so early. He feels bad for keeping secrets from them, but until he gets stronger, it's too dangerous for them to know everything. Ray gets up excitedly and asks at what stage of monocore he is at, but Elise gets angry at him and says his son just came home and is already talking about monocore stages. He exclaims, "There's nothing wrong with comparing their growth," and he tells him that after they got there, he has been working as the instructor for the Hellsteer auction house guards. Arthur makes fun, saying it wasn't only his facial hair that grew at this time, and asks him what stage his mana core is now. Ray proudly says he broke through 2 years back and entered the dark orange stage, and Arthur thinks it's easy to notice he has gotten bulkier, but to think he has broken through into the next stage, he appreciated him, saying he must have worked very hard, and he asked him about his stage. Arthur tells his color that it is light red, and he is shocked to hear about it. Elise appreciates him for his stage, and angrily asks him what she said about cursing in front of Ellie. Ray asks Ellie not to say that word again, and asks Arthur when he got the stage light red. He asks him to move to the backyard to spar right now, and Arthur just laughs at him, since he hasn't changed a bit. He thinks it's very good to be back. Suddenly, a man rushes to their home and says he just heard that his son is alive. Surprised at the scene inside, he asks what is happening in the world. Arthur observes them and thinks they are the people taking care of his family. Ray comes to them and says he wants them to meet his son, Arthur, and he is really back. He tells Arthur that he is Vincent Hellsteer, who runs the Hellsteer auction house, and his old friend with whom he now works. This is his house, so introduce himself before they start wrecking it. He bows before them and says, "It's a pleasure to meet them." He was sure this might all come as a surprise to him, but he was the one who had asked them not to tell anyone how he was, so he asked them for permission to apologize for the confusion. They were surprised to hear this, and Vincent asked him if he was sure he was related to his father. Arthur said he was often asked this question, but he really was his father. His wife also welcomed him, introduced her daughter Lilia to him, and said she was about her age, so she hoped the two of them could be friends. Lilia saw Sylvie and liked her a lot, but she hurriedly rushed toward her. Vincent asked him what was about wrecking his house, and Ray told him that Arthur and he were just about to return for some sparring. He was surprised to hear about sparring, and they all reached the backyard to see them. They stretched their bodies and were ready to fight. Alice and Miss Vincent gossiped while Lilia and Eleanor played with Sylvie. Vincent went to Alice and said her husband couldn't be serious about Arthur being a light red core mage, and she replied that she was surprised as well, but Arthur had always been a fast learner, and he had no reason to lie. Vincent said he was just supposed to believe that an 8-year-old had not only awakened, but had progressed through 3 stages. Even those snobby genius students admitted into Zurich's academy were barely at the dark red stage, and they were 11 or 12. Arthur said it would be best not to tell him he was only at light red, because he couldn't train his core while assimilating with Sylvia's beast will. Ray hoped he was ready, and that his father wasn't the man he was back then. Arthur said he was also not the same child he was back then. He moved swiftly, reached his father in no time and tried to hit him, but Ray dodged his attack with his hand. He said he was going to have to try harder, but Arthur's movements were undetectable, and he tried to attack him repeatedly. In the meantime, he grabbed him from his shoulder and put him down before he could do anything. He then asked him what he thought about his tricks, and Ray admitted that he caught him off guard. He said his old man was going to get serious now, and used a little trick he learned after he broke through into the dark orange stage. It was revealed that mages, starting from their awakening, had always had affinities or strengths in terms of what element they could best control. Parents sought out professionals for expensive testing on their child so that they could learn early on what route to push their newborn mage towards in this world. Conjurers had the innate advantage of manifesting and manipulating the element of their affinity. For augmenters, their affinity for elements was much more subtle, and the actual manifestation of the elements came only after the augmenter crossed a certain threshold. For his father, who had been fighting and training hard since an early age, but had no formal training, it took him until the orange core stage to be able to turn his explosive mana usage into an actual fire from the world he had come from. The elements weren't destined from birth, but a path one took willingly. Talent was a large part, but hard work played a significant role, since no one was restricted to just one affinity. For him, who had so many advantages since coming to this world, all of it culminated in this, and he learned a trick or two as well. He also showed his mana core, and asked him not to be surprised to see him. Vincent was shocked to see his aura, and discovered he was a deviant, while Ray seemed proud of him. He reached him in no time and tried to attack him, but he dodged his attack. They were fighting with their full powers, and it caused an explosion there. Everyone got attentive to see this. While they still had power left to fight, their movements were so fast that they couldn't see each other's attacks. And as expected of his father, his punches were getting sharper, and he was leveraging his longer reach so he couldn't get close. He targeted his leg and chin while everyone watched them with shocking eyes. Ray finally grabbed him and said he had learned many tricks. He thought lightning was by far his most successful deviant affinity, but he still had ways to go. Ice was unstable, and he hadn't even gotten to unlock sound or gravity at that time. The old man punched him very hard. However, it felt good to brag to his parents, and Ray asked him about when he learned it and what else he knew. Ellis ran toward them and asked if they were fine, while Mr. Vincent was shocked and thought he needed a drink. His wife was also impressed by him and thought he was just an extraordinary child, and they left them while enjoying their family time. After that, they had dinner together, and Vincent asked Ray if he realized what kind of future his son had. He replied he knew ever since he awakened when he was 3. They were surprised that he awakened at 3, and Elise told them that he blew up most of their house in the process. After some time, Vincent asked him if they could enroll him in Cyrus Academy. Ray said he was only 8, and Cyrus Academy was the most prestigious magic institution on the continent. His wife said her husband made a point though, and with his level of talent, it would be worthwhile for them to sponsor Arthur so he wouldn't have to worry about tuition costs. Elise refused by saying they couldn't do that to them, and after everything they had done for them already. Besides, he was just 8, and she was sure they wouldn't even consider him. Vincent said he did a lot of business with the famed director of Cyrus Academy and could talk to her. Arthur interrupted them and asked if he could say something, seeing as this would affect his future. After dinner, Ellie slept peacefully in her room. His parents were still with him, and Elise said she still couldn't believe he was there with them, all grown into a handsome boy. Arthur said he had changed a lot since they last saw him, while Ray said he was still their son, no matter how much he had changed, even after discovering he was a deviant mage capable of perhaps becoming one of the strongest mages in the future. That was still only the second best news today. Elise was sad, saying he was probably too grown up for his old mother to kiss him goodnight, but she got happy when he kissed her and said goodnight. Ray got up and asked Alice to leave his room so that he could get some sleep. She then asked him to go shopping with his sister tomorrow. He needed some new clothes, which would be a good chance for them to bond. Ray also advised him not to hold it against Vincent for being so excited earlier, since he meant well. A few hours ago at the dining table, he had said he had just reunited with his family today, and he asked them if he could spend some time with them before deciding whether to leave them again to attend this academy. Vincent said he was right, and getting a bit ahead of himself, but when he got up, he excused them. He left the dining table, and everyone just watched him. Surprisingly, he then walked through the balcony, and Lily followed him and said, if he headed that way, then he would end up in one of his cellars. She asked him to follow her, and she knew a better place. She took him to the kitchen and said, they had a guest today. The maid asked if he was that child who burned half of the lawn she worked so hard to maintain. He apologized for the trouble he had caused, and they invited them to sit with them. He observed Lily was pretty quiet before, but he guessed this was what she usually liked. She asked them if they had any duck meat left, and the maid asked her to be careful. Her mother had been getting suspicious because she had been gaining weight recently, and she said she was not allowed to talk about that. A maid told Arthur that she sneaked there often when stressed, and he wondered what stressed her. The butler said Sir and Madam's greatest wish was for their daughter to awaken as a mage. Despite neither of them being one themselves, Lily also wanted to be a mage, but it was still a lot of pressure on a little girl at present. He asked Ray not to worry, and he could tell that the Helstier family were nice people who meant well. The next morning, Sylvie woke him up, and he asked her if she was excited about the day. He wondered how Tesha was doing. Suddenly he felt a bad smell from Sylvie, and said he was not the only one taking a shower today. They both took a shower, but Sylvie seemed very dull and tired. After taking a shower, someone knocked at his door, and Ellie came to wake him at Alice's order. He asked her if she could take him down to see Mama, and she told him they would eat breakfast and then go shopping. They took them shopping, and he was excited to see the Cyrus city. They went to different shops, and after some time, he reached outside a shop and asked Arthur what sort of shop this was. Elise told him that those small orbs he saw were called beast cores. They were magical cores extracted from mana beasts to power the UPS, although the effects between cores could vary vastly. Spending hundreds of gold was a gamble, but one might even contain a beast will if they were lucky. He was shocked to hear about hundreds of gold, and thought he was good with his beast will. Elise revealed that their Helstier auction house received many beast cores and infant mana beasts. He was always welcome to look at those. When he got the chance, Lily asked him to go, and there was a place she wanted to take him. As soon as she saw him, she took him to a barber shop, and he asked them if it was necessary. Elise said his hair was atrocious. The barber asked them not to worry, and he would make his sun shine. After some time, he got the haircut and said he felt ridiculous, while Elise said he looked perfect. Ellie also liked him, and said he was good enough to be Ellie's brother now. And Elise said she was right, and he finally looked like a civilized man. After some time, he saw many students walking on the road, and Lily told him they were Cyrus Academy students. She said it was a sort of status symbol to be able to wear that uniform, and Arthur said they looked like jerks to him. Lily said they were almost considered royalty around there, though. Alice came to them and asked what they were talking about, and she replied, they were just talking about the school. Suddenly, they saw Arthur running like a puppy, and Elise said he was usually so calm and mature. It was refreshing to see him so excited to see him like this. Lily's mother said it was a bit comforting for him to see him more like a kid, especially after last night's spectacle, and they all were quiet after the discussion. After some time, he goes to a weapons store, and the man there says this is not a place for kids, and asks him to leave. While he is asking nicely, they exclaim that they are looking at a dangerous weapon, and the sword isn't like the toy swords they have at home. He tries to put his hand on his shoulder, but Arthur pushes him away. He exclaims that he is well aware of what a sword is, and leaves the shop to apologize to them. The man calls him and asks, what house raised such a rude guy? Meanwhile, Elise reaches there and asks him to get his hand off her son, and he gets angry and says his name is Augustus, but he is shocked to see Helstier, and she asks him if he is from the branch family of House Ravenpur. She asks him if he wants to revoke her and her family's participation in the Helstier auction house. He bowed before her and apologized to her, saying he had no idea this child was with the Helstier house. They get out of the situation, and Arthur thanks her for getting him out of the situation. She says she was more. It is revealed that the Cyrus Academy is an institution hailed as the holiest sanctuary for any would-be made privileged enough to have both the background and talent to enter. It is a breeding ground for acclaimed scholars, guild members, leaders, royal guards, and military powerhouses. Anyone who has made an impact in this world had ties with Cyrus Academy, and that was the kind of fame this school held, an insurmountable titan compared to the countless other academies scattered over this continent. Standing at the helm of it all is the Academy's very own director, Goods Arthur. Stares at her for a while, and she forwards her hand and says it's nice to meet him. Finally, he wonders about the proper social convention in a situation like this, and whether he has to kiss or shake her hand. He is about to shake hands with her when Elise asks him to bow down and apologizes to her for her son's rude behavior. She says he has just returned home and is ignorant of formal customs, while Arthur hopes that doesn't take long since he hasn't eaten in hours. She says it's all right, and she is the rude one for intruding at such a late hour, but she can't refuse a favor from Vincent after all his great contributions to Cyrus Academy. He says he is just helping out the Academy, hoping Lily will attend one day, She gets sad on hearing this, and the director says it isn't very often that she takes a house trip to visit potential students. Still, Vicente piqued her interest when he insisted that a prodigy of the highest caliber was currently living in his home. She asks his wife to lead them to an open space so he can see a demonstration, while Arthur asks if he can at least eat something. She leads her the way, and Vincent says they have a wonderful paved courtyard suitable for the demonstration. Arthur is sad because he feels hungry and thinks it looks like they won't be eating dinner anytime soon. She observes Sally there and asks if it is his father's contracted beast, and he tells her that she is his bond and she hatched just a few months ago. She calls him interesting and says many nobles there purchase manor beasts to form a contract, but she has never seen a manor beast like her. Arthur says her mother was some sort of scaled wolf with small wings, and she was almost dead protecting her egg when he stumbled into her nest. After a while, Vincent takes them to the courtyard, and the director says they will see if what Vincent said isn't just an exaggeration. He mentioned that he was an augmenter, but refused to tell her anything beyond that. She observes that he appears neither worried nor scared, and wonders if confidence or arrogance leaves him so collected. He wonders what will be for dinner, and he feels like grilled fish today. Vincent thinks she will definitely be shocked when Arthur shows his fire and lightning magic, and he won't be able to burn this courtyard down. The last time, the director asks him if he doesn't want to arm himself with a weapon, at the very least, and Arthur says, seeing as she has no intention of using the wand decorating her waistband, that he will go barehanded as well. She smiles at his comment and asks if they will begin. Then he thinks, during his time training with Virium, the explosive power of fire and the adaptive riposte of water were the first chi arts from his world to manifest as actual elements in this world. For him, after that, his previous life's earth and wind-style martial arts techniques also culminated. He gathers his mana core and opens up his eyes, which induces main cracks in the ground. He has controlled the mixture of internal and ambient mana and shaped it into the desired effect. Everyone is shocked to see that he has cracked the courtyard and thinks differently from conjurers. Are the fundamental steps augmenters take to manifest an elemental attack. He had a bit of a handicap with his past knowledge, and he now wanted to see how the director of the most prestigious magic academy would react when he did this. He lifted a heavy rock and kicked it toward the director to see her reaction. The director smiled at his attack, but the rock split into many parts before reaching her. She then moved her hand and gathered many rocks around Arthur by dodging them. He rushed toward her and reached the director by breaking through her barrier, but she just barely moved her hand and pushed him away from her. He was about to fall to the ground, but used the wind to help him orient himself and suspend the rocks in the air. However, even with all of his training with Virion, it was still difficult to use earth and wind spells simultaneously compared to fire and water. He needed more concentration. So he rushed toward her to attack again, but she used her wind attribute and moved him away. The wind pressure was so large that everyone had covered their eyes. Arthur again got up, but he was shocked to see that she had already finished preparing another spell and threw a large wind attack towards him. He tried to conjure wind in the opposite rotation to deflect the tornadoes, and his clothes had torn away in this attempt. However, he successfully dodged the attack, and the director was impressed by his movements. She said he was overconfident in his abilities to face opponents head-on. All in all, his display of magical and combat prowess was exceptional, and she was about to cast another spell, saying it would be her last test. An extra credit of sorts. She used a spell and asked him to try to stay conscious, and she used sound magic, which caused so much pain in his ears. He passed with flying colors, and with the aptitude he had shown in wind magic. The director liked him, and said she was tempted to teach him herself. Ray was surprised, and asked him when he had learned to use earth and wind magic as well, and the director asked him what he meant by as well. Vincent revealed that he had used fire magic just yesterday, and lighting magic, and this was why he had brought her out into this paved courtyard, because he had burned down his lawn. The director was surprised to learn that this little boy was capable of controlling at least 3 elements, and one to its deviant level. And Arthur said he could control 4 elements. He had an elemental affinity for all 4 elements, and they were all surprised to hear this. Ellie asked Elise if her brother was strong, and the director said he was very strong, or perhaps the strongest in the future. After everyone settled down, he apologized to his family for keeping this from them, and Elise asked him not to hide anything from them. His chest tightened at her words. He wished he could promise her that after that, they were still in the courtyard. when the director created a barrier around them and said they couldn't hear them and asked him to speak his mind. Arthur smiled and thought it seemed like she read right through him. And he said he showed her his abilities because there were two things that she had and needed. They were power and influence, and he asked her to keep his family safe until he became strong enough to do so by himself. He would not only attend her academy, but he would also consider her as his benefactor. The director smiled and said, not even the king and queen of Seipan would dare to make such a one-sided deal with her. He asked her if she thought she would bend to establish a relationship with a mere child. He smiled and said that compared to even the king and queen of Seipan, he was more aware of the potential of the mere child and trusted that she did as well. However, his end of this deal would be to wait until he actually attended her academy. He said he had made a promise to someone important to live his life to the fullest, and he thought attending Cyrus Academy at a more normal age would help him with that. The director said it would be over 3 years from now on, and asked him what he planned on doing until then. He replied that he hadn't told his family yet, but had decided to become an adventurer. Sometime he took his parents to a room, and everyone could hear him tell his decision to his parents, and they didn't like it. Elise was angry at him and said he had just gone back after they all thought he was dead, and now he was saying he wanted to get killed himself out there. Ellie was scared and asked her not to be mad at her brother, and Ray asked her to hear him out at least. She shouted at him and asked how he could say that after everything they went through to get there. She started crying and asked if he understood her, and he grabbed her hand and said he wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. He was actually looking forward to spending a few months at home with everyone. He exclaimed, after staying in the Elf Kingdom for more than 3 years, and he felt like he had missed so much of Seipan and the rest of Dickathon, he wanted to experience the excitement they both experienced back when they were adventurers. Ray understood his perception and said even though he was itching to experience the adventuring life when he awakened as a teenager, his mother was right to worry. No matter how prepared and strong he was, the life of an adventurer was dangerous and unpredictable. Suddenly, he clicked his mind and asked them if he could escort any guard or supervisor with him. Ray says it's a good idea, but they must consider the man. Elise grabs his collar and shouts at him, saying she can't believe that he is even considering it, and she will not let him send her son away for another 3 years. He then tells them that he is not planning to go for 3 years, and will return every few months or more frequently between his missions. Elise doesn't say a word, while Ellie comes to him and asks if he is leaving them again. He says he is staying right there, and she will see her brother often. Elise asks him why he wants to become an adventurer, and says it will make more sense for him to go to school before becoming an adventurer. He replies that he would have been much younger than the other students if he had gone to school. Now he wants to fit in and make friends, but that might be harder with such a big age difference. Elise says he doesn't need to go now, and that he should help out his father. Ray asks her to stop and says he will be fine. He thanks his dad and says he doesn't want just to train, but he wants to fight and test out the skills he has learned since coming to this world in an open environment. Elise starts hitting Ray, since he permits him, and he thinks he didn't lie to his mother, since Sylvia told him to enjoy his life, and he is doing that. The next morning, they are making their breakfast, and Elise asks Ray to eat slowly, and no one is going to steal his food. He is happy to enjoy a meal without being rushed to work. Vincent asks him if he isn't going to the auction house later today to show some of the new recruits around, and he replies that it's just an excuse to hold a welcoming party afterwards. Arthur asks them what they have planned for today, and Helsthea tells him that his mother and she have to run some errands around town to prepare for an upcoming event at the Helsthea auction house. They are taking Lily and Ellie with them and ask him to accompany them, but he refuses by saying he will stay behind. Vincent asks him if they settled on what to do about Arthur, and Elise says they agreed to let him become an adventurer under certain conditions. The first condition is that he will wait until after his birthday in 3 months. Second, he will have a guard on him at all times during missions, and third, he will have to visit at least once every 2 months. Ray says he is smart enough to manage the rest independently, and Vincent asks him if he has anyone in his mind who can appoint him as his guard. Moreover, if there is even a guard capable of guarding him. Ray gets up and reveals that the Twin Horns will be coming around after a dungeon expedition soon, and he gets a letter from the Adventurers Guild that says they will be back in 2 months so they can have one of them go with Arthur. Elise likes his idea, and Ray asks her if she is surprised by it. Arthur remembers the Twin Horns, Jasmine, Durden, Angela, Helen, and Adam, and is excited to see them all soon. After some time, Vincent is working in his office when someone knocks at his door. He opens the door and is surprised to see Arthur there. He thinks he missed his father and tells him he is at the auction house. Arthur tells him that he came there to speak with him regarding a certain matter and asks him permission to come inside the office on the other side. Alice and Hestia are in the market, and Alice asks her if these kinds of stuff are appropriate for the 10th anniversary event. And she tells her that she has seen a lot of the noble ladies adoring the centerpiece she made. She wonders how anyone even saw them, and she reveals that she stole a few from the house and used them to decorate the private viewing rooms at their auction house. Alice felt so embarrassed because they were just cheap little armaments she had made in her free time. At the same time, Ellie seems sad, and Lily asks her the reason, and she tells her that she is missing her brother. Lily gets sad and says she came there with her, but now she has her brother, so she is not important to Ellie anymore. She tries to tell her that they both have their place for her, but Lily says she loved her before her brother, but now that her big brother is there, so she just throws her away. Ellie starts crying at this when Hestia hits her head and asks why she is giving Ellie such a hard time. She tells her that she was just teasing her because all Ellie has been thinking about these days is Arthur. And Hestia says it looks like Ellie isn't the only one thinking about Arthur, and asks if he is her first crush too. Lily gets embarrassed, asks why she is saying such things and says he is just a big weirdo. She thought that kids of her age couldn't be mages, and this is why she is still patiently waiting to awaken. But Arthur is already a mage that is stronger than a lot of adults. She is sad that she can't do such things, but she wants to be a mage and make them happy. Alice and Hestia just look at each other, and she comes forward to her and says, it's hard not to, but she shouldn't compare herself to Arthur. He should know from kids of her age at school that Arthur is the different one, and she asks him how he got so strong, and if they have trained him, then they can also help her to train. Elise tells her that, aside from the little sword training that Ray did for Arthur, they didn't do anything. Hestia was also shocked and said she understood he was a very gifted child, but they were still missing pieces of the story. Elise said she was grateful that they cared so much, but Ray and she both knew Arthur was hiding things from them. Hestia suggested they should ask him about everything, and asked how he got so strong while he was away, and how, even before the bandit attacked, he was so skilled with the sword. She replied that they believed there was a good reason why he was not telling them everything, and she figured to give him space and support him until he was comfortable enough to tell them what it means to be a parent. Hestia became answerless, and they continued their shopping. At the same time, the man from earlier was watching them quietly. He then went to a silent place and asked a man to inform Lord Sebastian that the mana beast wasn't with them. That day, a mage from Cyrus Academy had been placed to guard them, so he wouldn't be able to trail them too extensively. However, the boy who was most likely the master of the mana beast would be attending the 10-year Hestia auction house anniversary event. He asked him to inform Lord Sebastian that the best opportunity would be at the event. On the other side, Arthur was at Vincent's office. He wondered what sort of situation this was, and what sort of 8-year-old boy gives off such a strong presence that he would be more nervous than when he was with the King of Saban. He thanked him for the tea, and Vincent thought he was so different from when he was with his family. He wondered if this was his true demeanor. He then told him the reason for his sudden intrusion was that he would like to ask him to retrieve a few items. Vincent asked him what kind of items those were, and he stated, a protective cloak, preferably one with a hood, a decent sword for his size, and a mask capable of altering his voice. Vincent said the cloak shouldn't be a problem, but with a mask, only an artificer who's a deviant sound mage would be able to make one properly. Suddenly, he remembered he was already buried in work for the anniversary event, and wondered why he was so eager to please this boy. Arthur thanked him and said it was for compensation. At the same time, he didn't have money. He thought of a way to repay him for his help. Vincent said he didn't need anything, since his father had been a huge help ever since he started working for him. And thanks to him and the training he was providing for all of their guards, thefts and fights in the auction house had been the lowest it had ever been. Arthur said he still wanted to do one thing, to help his sister hasten her awakening with a method that he discovered recently, and when he helped her, he could also help Lily. He knew that neither he nor his wife were mages, but he believed he could help his daughter awaken as a mage and attend the Cyrus Academy. After that, he was training in his room, but even after all this time, he could only use it for a few seconds. He thought about Elder Virion and the director, and got up again, thinking it wasn't enough. After a lot of training, he was hell-tired and had been laid to the ground, and he thought that whether it was his past life or this life, he needed strength to protect the people he loved. In the meantime, Alice and Helstia returned from shopping. He remembered his past life when, on a horrible night, he rushed to see his father, but was shocked to see that someone had murdered him. He cried a lot, but no one helped him, and the policeman just stood there with the gun used in the murder. He thought, this time he would get strength not to avenge but to keep them safe. Meanwhile, Sylvie came to him and informed him that his family had returned from their errands. When he went downstairs, Elise came to him and asked him what he said to Vincent, that he was making Lily a mage. She said that even as a harmless joke, it was a little insensitive. And Helstia said that if this was some kind of prank, then he went a bit too far. He replied that he would never joke about something like this, and he proposed a deal to Vincent, and he accepted. He seemed happy and said Arthur promised him to show them once they got back, so he asked everyone to go to the living room. They all went to the living room, and he sat Lily and Ellie beside him and asked them to breathe in the way. He told them he thought mana was sensed best during slow and deep breaths that were in precise rhythmic patterns, and hoped that this explanation would be easy for them to follow. The first step was to breathe specially, but Ellie was too young to understand what he was saying. He asked her to follow her instructions, and if she could do this, she would be able to become strong like her brother. He hoped that she would be able to understand his instructions, and asked both of them to breathe like he did. He asked them to take a deep breath through their nose until they couldn't breathe anymore. Once they couldn't breathe anymore, they opened their mouths to breathe in just once more and let out their breath in small bursts about 15 times. When they did this, he asked them to do it again with their eyes closed until they saw pretty lights floating around in the darkness. Ellie could see the pretty lights, but they were gone instantly, and Arthur said this was because she stopped breathing. Lily was worried that she couldn't see them and asked if there was something wrong with her, and he said this was because her parents were not mages, so that she would take some time. Elise asked him if he could tell them what he was trying to do. Helstia also interrupted, saying, "She means well, and she won't question his skills with magic. But teaching a child to awaken as a mage is unprecedented. Then it should happen naturally." He said he was going to help them do what he did to awaken at the age of 3, and the only reason he thought he could do this was because of his affinity with all the elements. He had worked it out in his head, but they would surely know after trying. He asked them to see if this worked as well as he theorized, and he asked them to keep breathing the way he had told them to, even if they felt their bodies a little hot. He transported some of his mana into their bodies, and Lily could now see the pretty lights. He then asked them to try gathering the white specks together with their thoughts. He said, "Those little lights are their friends, and they need to be together to be happy." After some time, they seemed pretty tired, and he said, "This is all I can do today." Lily's parents seemed happy, and asked him if their daughter would be able to become a mage. He replied that it would take a few years, but if he could do this with them for the first few months to get them on their feet, then Lily shouldn't have a problem becoming a mage. Helstia became emotional and hugged him while apologizing for doubting him. She said, because of him, her baby will have so many opportunities that they weren't given because they weren't mages. Lily also smiled and went to her dad, who was also crying happily. After that, his life fell into a comfortable rhythm, and he spent every morning training and then helping his sister and Lily get closer to awakening. After that, they also enjoyed their family time, and everything was happy and smooth. Even with his impatience to get stronger, he still made sure to spend time with everyone, knowing that he wouldn't have many more opportunities like this in the future. 2 months later, when it was finally time for the twin horns to be returned, Ray and Alice seemed excited to see them back. Ray said he was not the only one excited to see them, because Arthur was already at the gate, waiting for them impatiently. Suddenly, Sylvie appeared from behind, and he said she was not small enough to ride on his shoulder. Someone knocked at the door, and he opened the door for them. Angela hugged him hurriedly and started crying, saying he had had it so hard for such a young boy. Durden asked her to leave him, and she left him, saying she got a little emotional and forgot about her manners. He looked towards Durden and said he had become even bigger than before, but was also crying emotionally. He said he could say the same for him. Adam was watching them from behind and said the game plan was to put on a happy face for the kid, but now they had crying faces. He asked them if no one would comment on that black manor beast hanging behind his shoulder. Helen hit him, said he could just ignore him, and said they were so glad to see him all grown up and even more handsome. Adam said he was the only bad guy for not crying, and said it was not his fault, but he was mature enough to keep it together. Suddenly, Jasmine rushed from behind and hugged him. While everyone was shocked at her reaction, she apologized to him for not being able to save him earlier, and this filled Adam's eyes with tears. Ray and Alice were watching them with wet eyes and said they missed their timing. Today was the 10th anniversary, and Vincent asked Arthur if they didn't need conjurers inside. He replied that they had Angela and another wind conjurer alternating detection barriers around the auction house and Durden manning the main entrances. More than that, people might suspect they were preparing for a war. He was grateful to him that his old party agreed to help him out with security. And Ray said, with them there, he was able to position some of the other guards outside, around the next block. They would engage any outside threat so the guests would be safe, and the auction house wouldn't be destroyed. Vincent knew he was joking, but after his recent experience with mages, he was going to hold him back from that promise. He then told him that his son mentioned he wanted a sword before he registered as an adventurer, and considering his fighting style with his gauntlets, he didn't expect him to teach Arthur's sword fighting. Ray said the only thing he did for him was get him a wooden starter sword, and aside from that, since he was 4, he learned on his own. He said Arthur told them that he's self-taught, but the few times they had sparred, there were times when he emitted a huge pressure, and it looked like this sort of calculated confidence that he'd fought battles for decades. Vincent said Arthur hadn't even lived for 1 decade, so he thought he was giving him a bit too much credit. But Ray had observed that when they sparred, there were times when he suddenly tripped or messed up like he was not used to his own body. Vincent said this was because of early puberty, and Ray asked him to go downstairs, since everyone was waiting for them. Helstia said it took them a long time when they went downstairs, and asked how the 2 grown men were the last to get ready. Vincent was surprised and appreciated them, saying they all looked great. He just felt sorry that they made everyone wear just black and white. They were the hosts for the event, so he didn't want to stand out from the guests, but he didn't need to make Ray's family match the dress code. Alice said it was no problem, and they would have felt uncomfortable wearing bright colors anyway. Dressing up like this made him realize that Arthur was just some cute kid no matter what he wore right now, and he just hoped his growth spurt would come soon. Vincent then asked everyone to move outside, where the carriages were waiting for them. He then put his hand on Arthur's shoulder and said he had heard that his daughter was progressing well. He replied that if she continued like this, she should be able to awaken in time to attend to Cyrus at an average age. He thanked him again, and Arthur said he was just holding his end of the deal, and expected to see some great stuff at his auction house. They came outside and were ready to go toward the auction house. During the way, he told them the story he had to go through all these years, and Adam seemed sad that he went through all this at such an early age. Helen said he was able to find a bond at least, which was something even seasoned adventurers and nobles were rarely able to have. He replied, this was why Sylvie was special to him. Soon they reached outside the auction house, where the guards welcomed them. He was surprised to see a grand and luxurious Helstia auction house. Today was the 10th anniversary of the Helstia auction house, an event nobles and adventurers alike had been excited for. It would be a celebration, and a chance to see and perhaps buy priceless artifacts that had been kept locked away and guarded for this particular event. He was surprised to see so many beast cores and weird things. The exterior of this building was amazing, but the inside held up just as well. Meanwhile, Vincent called all staff and said today was a big day, and they should get their heads together and ensure no mistakes were made. Ray instructed Team B to check the side corridors of every half hour, before circling back to their original routes. Arthur exclaimed that it was good to see them like this, especially his father, which was a big change from how he usually was. And Helen said his father was a leader after all. She had grown since she took his place, but she still couldn't match up to him. She left him there, and Elise called Arthur to her. She asked him to go inside, and Vincent and Ray would join them. A little later they entered a great hall, and the auctioneer must have been hosting the event, even having been a king and living amongst the royal family of the Elenoir kingdom. This was impressive. Helstia asked him what he thought about their auction house, and he said she was seriously downplaying the word house there. She was glad he liked it. and Lily asked him to wait until he saw the private viewing rooms at the top. They were going upstairs and had arrived at the private rooms. Seeing how grand this place was, he was excited to see what sort of items they would auction off today. Helstia said they expected some very special guests later on, but this was their place for now. After some time, Lily informed them that the event was starting and so many people were in the hall. Helstia asked the kids what they were doing, and Lily told her that Ellie was trying to count all the people coming in, and she asked her to play with her instead of counting people. They started playing while Alice and Helstia were chatting. Arthur thought they were all having fun. Meanwhile, a guard came there and informed Helstia that the VIP guests had arrived and would be there soon. They were ready to welcome them, and Vincent presented His Majesty Blaine, Glider, Priscilla Gladys, Prince Curtis Glader, and Princess Catholme Glader. Arthur felt it then, the same as in Elenoir, when he was in the presence of royalty. They all bowed before them and paid their respect. And the king said he didn't know they would share this space with guests. Vincent apologized to him and said he remembered he wanted to meet his family again the last time they were there, so he thought today would be a good time for that. He introduced his wife and daughter, Alice, as his close friend's wife and their children, Arthur and Eleanor, Lewin. The king asked them to stand up, saying Vincent's friends were also his friends. He said they were there to congratulate the Helsius on this wondrous place's 10th anniversary, and to enjoy the event. The Queen also said there was no need to remain so formal. They should enjoy the event, and that they were pleased that they had some company besides their guards. Meanwhile, Sylvie appeared there, and the Queen said it was a cute little manor beast that looked reptilian-based but more intelligent. Arthur said she had just hatched several months ago, and her name was Sylvie. The king asked him if this beast was his bond, and called him fortunate since infant beasts were not easy to take. Yet she seemed very obedient. Arthur said they were able to communicate mentally, so it was more like a mutual agreement rather than obedience. Suddenly someone was shocked to hear this from behind and asked if he was under an equal contract with this manor beast, and Arthur said she was the one who initiated the contract. He asked him to let him take a closer look at his bond, but the king asked him to stop, saying this was not a place to study someone's pain. He called him Sebastian and said he was on duty, and he bowed before him and apologized for his behavior. Helstia calls them and asks them to have a seat, since the event must be starting, while Arthur feels something weird about the mage Sebastian. After a while, a man announces that it is his highest honor to be there tonight, and he presumes all of their esteemed guests have gathered there for one reason only. This is for the chance to obtain one of the rare and valuable items at the auction. However, before they begin, he asks everyone to turn their faces toward the south. He welcomes the king and the queen of Saipan, who are also present. Everyone gets up and bows before them. Next, they thank the man who has made this whole event possible, and ask everyone to give a big round of applause for Vincent Helstia. Arthur thinks this reminds him of his past life, but he is no longer a king. Moreover, he hasn't even gone through puberty yet. After that, Ellie and Lily play, and his mother and Miss Helstia talk to the queen. He observes that the queen is a conjurer, and the fact that he couldn't sense her mana means she is carrying an artifact to hide it. She is at a level high enough that he can't sense it. He had never really thought about it before, but it's interesting how he doesn't feel any attraction to the queen or any older woman, even though they are in the same age range as he was when he died. It might be because they are his mother's age, but it's not like he finds younger girls attractive either. It's not like he has any plans on dating anytime soon, and he will think about it when he is older. In the meantime, Vincent comes to him and says a sword is up for auction right now, and asks him if he wants it so he can bid. He also asks him not to worry about the price, and this is just the perk of being the owner of this place. The man announces that the short sword was forged by a master smith, who is also a fire artificer. Imbued above the handle is the core of a mighty thunderhawk. He announces that reinforcing this masterful sword with just a bit of mana will produce currents of electricity around the edge of its blade, enhancing its cutting power and even exuding a paralyzing effect. He starts the bidding with 50 gold, and people start calling their amounts. A modest house in Cyrus could fetch at least a single gold coin, but an average family back in his hometown of Ashbur could live just fine on a handful of copper coins a day. The opening bid for this sword could provide a modest living for a family for over 250 years. Vincent comes to him and asks if it is to his liking, and a sword with an elemental ability is hard to come by. Arthur says it sounds like a powerful weapon, but not something he needs. and he would prefer something a little less unique. Vincent smiles and asks why he plays with a spark when he can wield lightning itself. However, this is just the beginning, and even if he doesn't find anything he likes, he manages to find all the other items he wants. He asks him if he found a voice-altering mask, and he proudly says he has found it. And even the coat he got him is made from a nightmare fox. It has the ability to obscure his presence from unsuspecting eyes. It seemed like something he would want, so he snatched it while he could. He asks him to stay safe, since he is the one who will have to deal with his family if anything happens to him, while he just smiles at him. However, Vincent was right. Because the sword was only the beginning, there were more weapons and even several beast cores ranging from C-class all the way to A-class. The king himself bid on a few of them, winning an A-class beast core, but it wouldn't be until its recipient actually absorbed the core that they would learn whether or not the core contained a beast will. He seems tired, wonders when the intermission is coming, and suddenly realizes that Sylvie is not with him. He asks Lily about her, and she replies that she was just there. He looks for her behind and under the sofa, but she is nowhere. Suddenly he finds Sebastian trying to pick her up, and he is about to grab her, but she seems sad. He thinks he needs to control himself, since he is the royal family's court mage. Sylvie sees him and rushes toward him, and he turns back and asks her to go. Sebastian exclaims that the commoner in the countryside has no place frolicking around with such a special beast, and Arthur asks him what he just said. He replies that Sylvie will belong to him one day, and Arthur stares him back furiously and asks him to repeat what he just said a moment ago. He asked him to give the royal family's guard his bond, which would be a service to his kingdom. Ray was shocked at his demand and looked toward Arthur, who also seemed shocked. He asked the king about what he meant by this, and the king said he was more than happy to compensate him for the bond, and hiring a mage to serve the contract between his son and the mana beast would be done at their expense. Ray bowed before him and apologized to him, saying neither he nor his wife had anything to do with his son's bond. He had acquired it himself, so he couldn't speak on his behalf regarding this matter. Elise was also worried about this, and the king just stared at him. Arthur also stared at him, and Sebastian came to him angrily and asked if his parents hadn't taught him to lower his gaze when speaking to his superiors. The king now talked to him and said he was sure he had just heard his conversation with his father, so that he wouldn't repeat himself. He offered him a sword befitting any aspiring young knight. Arthur asked himself to keep calm, since he was still the king of Sapin. Arthur bowed before him and thanked him for his gracious offer, but he must refuse, since even the most magnificent sword could never replace Sylvie. Sebastian again tried to interrupt, but the king asked him to stop and asked him to trade his world lion cub that he had just purchased for his bond. Curtis was shocked and said the mana beast belonged to him, and the king asked him to think about the offer, and said, indeed his mana beast seems unique, but reptilian beasts rarely grow to be as strong as true predatory mana beasts. Arthur then apologized for failing to clarify himself, but he didn't wish to give, sell, or trade his bond. The king said he had asked him for a favor twice, and his patience was running thin, and he would ask him kindly one last time, and asked him if he would give his bond. Arthur asked him permission to ask him a question as well. He asked him how much he would be willing to sell his children for. He had asked him thrice and rejected all 3 times. Yet, it seemed his pride wouldn't allow him to accept his refusal, and said he didn't seem to be aware of the gravity of what he was asking him, so he hoped his question would make it clear. He asked him how much money he required in exchange for his son or daughter. Later, everyone was shocked at his question, and Sebastian directed the guard to attack him. The guard came to him and called him an insolent peasant, and asked how he dared to insult the king and his family. Arthur observed he was concentrating all of his mana into his sword, and wondered if he intended to cut him in half. He kept the flow of mana calm, and even anticipated the enemy's movement and took control of the path of his strike. He moved slightly and dodged his attack, and as a result, the sword hit the ground. He disrupted his balance and exploded, using both his power and momentum against him, and punched him back with his full might. Sebastian was angry that he wasn't even able to kill a child and wasted the perfect chance. He took out his wand and thought that even if punished, he would take matters into his own hands. What the king didn't realize was that a bond capable of forming an equal contract at such a young age meant it would eventually grow beyond a class. He just wanted the beast and tried to attack him, but he dodged him too. He was shocked that his attack wasn't of any use, and Arthur said spells that need ambient mana to fuel them wouldn't work. He stared at him furiously, while Sebastian asked everyone to stay back, and asked him if he thought he was a match for a conjurer of the royal family. Arthur moved in no time, and passed through him swiftly before he could notice him. After that, Sebastian fell to the ground and cried for his leg, which was heavily injured, and he called everyone to help him, and asked why everyone was just standing there. Arthur put his hand on his shoulder and said no one was going to hear him, so he should listen while he was still able to. He cried and said he couldn't do this time because he was the personal conjurer of the king himself. He again stared at him with murderous intent and asked him to know his place. He then hit another guard while the king was watching him shockingly, and wondered how this commoner child did his guard trip over his own feet or something. Suddenly, he observed Sebastian lying on the ground at a distance and wondered how he reached there. Lily was shocked to see his injured leg and cried out of fear. Everyone else was also shocked to see Sebastian's leg broken. He cried in pain and asked someone to help him, and the king was shocked to see his condition. The queen called the guards, asked what they were doing and asked them to check his vitals. Meanwhile, Arthur also lay there unconscious, and Ray checked out for his condition, but he was still breathing. He lifted him, and Elise used her healing powers to heal him. She was crying over his condition, and Helsius's family was just watching them quietly. After some time, he got into consciousness in his room, and he felt so much pain in his head. He wondered how he got back to his room, and the last thing he remembered was that he used static void. He regretted that he overdid it again, and thanks to Sylvia, he was able to use static void. Once he had unlocked the acquire phases of her dragon will with it, he was able to separate himself from the flow of time temporarily. And it was a game-changing ability that was only available to him because he was a legacy tamer. However, it came at a cost. Despite his years of training, he was only able to use this ability for a few seconds without feeling the harsh backlash. He thinks he went over his limit, and it was his first time using static void on another person as well. He guessed he was lucky that things only ended with him falling unconscious. Meanwhile, Elise comes to his room with Sylvie and finds out that he is awake. She hugs him and says the doctor said he most likely fell unconscious from shock and that he would wake up soon, though he would have to say the doctor's use of the word soon was rather off. It has been almost 8 hours since he fell unconscious, and Arthur regrets that he made her worry again. She asks him if something is wrong, since it looks like he is in pain, and he asks her what happened after he passed out. She replies that no one was in their right state of mind, especially the kids. So the king and his family excused themselves first. His father is downstairs in the living room with the king's representative, discussing what happened, and he gets up saying he will see how he is doing downstairs. Elise says she will check up on Ellie and sleep with her, just in case, and asks him if he is really fine. He replies that he is fine now, and asks her to get some rest. He asks Sylvie to go with Mum, and as he comes downstairs he hears Ray's voice who says, "This isn't something that can be compensated with money," and his son was almost killed by the guards. He enters the room, and Ray is surprised to see him there. He asks him what is going on there, and he tells him that the king's representative just tossed a few gold coins as a token of apology from the king for what he said was a small incident. The man gets up and asks if he is Arthur Lewin. He introduces himself as Jasper Cogwright, and is there on behalf of His Majesty to extend his utmost condolences for what happened today. He thinks he will just play the modest victim, and thanks him for coming all this way. The king says he has told his father most of what happened, but he also wanted to inform them too that both guards who attacked him have been relieved of their positions. Ray asks him if the king slapped them on the wrist and waved them goodbye, and the representative says his son spoke out of turn in front of His Majesty. They both glare at each other, and Arthur says, "Mr. Cogwright isn't wrong, and he was out of line as well. Besides, he is not hurt, so they should just end this matter." He then smirked and asked him about the conjurer whose knee had broken. He replies that Sebastian has been stripped of his position, and the injury he sustained is currently being treated. He asks him if they were able to assess what exactly happened to his leg, and he replies that upon waking up, Sebastian was adamant, saying that he was the one that inflicted that injury. Ray shouts at him and asks how this even makes sense, and Mr. Cogwright asks him to let him finish. First, he exclaims that, judging by the lingering mana on his staff, they believe that the mana released from the first knight who had acted out ricocheted and interfered with Sebastian's spell. Arthur wonders if this whole thing will just end like that, and he leaves from there. After some time, Ray gives him the money and says he is the one who almost died, and besides, he is going to need some money when he starts off as an adventurer. He then asks him to return to sleep and get some rest, and he thanks him for this. He then puts the money in a drawer, and thinks the situation with Sebastian has managed to blow over without any problems, but it makes him all too conscious that he is still only a kid in this world. However, it will be different when he is on an adventure and checks out the things Vincent gave, and he thinks he may be let loose a little the next morning. They go to Twin Horns and tell them about Arthur's adventure. They ask them who wants to accompany him. Adam refuses by saying, "Babysitting isn't my forte, and with his personality, his son might kill him in his sleep one day." Everyone agrees with him, while Arthur just laughs at his comment. Ray says he was hoping Durden or Helen would accompany him, and says they can't offer much, but Alice and he are more than willing to compensate them in whatever way they can if they do this for them. Durden says they are family, and he would love to accompany Arthur and watch him grow. Helen also says they wouldn't do this for the money. Besides, they managed to get quite a bit of treasure from their last dungeon raid. Suddenly, they are shocked to see that Jasmine herself offers to go with him. Angela is also surprised, because they know that she hates escorting missions even more than Adam. She replies that she can do this for Arthur, and Helen says that she is the most suitable person to protect him. Durden specializes mostly in defensive area of effect spells for larger parties, and protection isn't Helen's strong suit either. Elise asks Jasmine if she is sure she is fine doing this, and she assures him of this. Adam also asks them to let her go, since she's the only augmenter among them with an elemental affinity. She just broke the light orange stage last year, and with her wind attribute, she is probably best suited. Durden also agrees and says he would have liked to accompany Arthur, but it doesn't make sense for more than one of them to go. Ray says he may go next time. Arthur smiles and says he will be her care for now, and she just smiles at him. After that, they return home, and Ellie gets angry to see Lily train without her. He thinks Lilia is able to meditate on her own a bit, even without him imbuing mana into her, and Ellie should be able to awaken at age 7 or 8 if she actually has the patience to meditate. Still, maybe it's for the better that she doesn't awaken too early. He doesn't like the idea of all that attention on her. He then calls Ray and asks if the auction house is open quickly, because he wants to pick out a sword. Since he couldn't the last time they were there, Alice asks them not to stay there too long, as she is going to start preparing dinner right now. At the same time, Lily's father and mother had been working at the auction house and were waiting for them. It was the first time he had seen either of them since the incident, and he was faced with a long string of questions from them regarding his health. He did his best to reassure them that he was fine and that he was happy it was all over, but they were less than pleased by the king's behavior regarding this incident. Vincent is sure those 2 guards getting fired is just a temporary measure until things cool down, and it won't be long before they have their positions back. Ray also thinks the same. Arthur interrupts them and says they came there because he needed to find a sword before he took his application test at the Adventurers Guild. Vincent asks him to follow them and says it might take some time for them to find something he likes, but he is free to dig around. They enter a huge store, and Arthur is very impressed by this. At first he is happy, but soon he is disappointed that there are so many different types of swords, but nothing that he wants. He thinks it must be because of how many warriors in this world are augmenters, but there are so many more two-handed swords, or large one-handed ones. His search for a dependable sword that he could use with his smaller body bore little fruit. He was tempted to give up and find a more unique weapon. In the meantime, after a while he sees Sylvie looking for something, and asks her if she finds anything. She takes out a stick, and Arthur says, this is not something he was looking for. He doesn't know what she wants him to do with the stick. However, he feels the stick is heavy, and the balance is off for just a stick, and it is almost as if this is a sword. He tries to unsheath it, but it doesn't open, and he wonders if he needs to imbue it with mana in order to use it. He continued to test his theory by utilizing all of the elements at his disposal, but the sword remains stuck. After some time he is tired, and wonders how it will open if it is not with a specific element. He then sees toward his arm, which has been covered by Sylvia's wind, and uses her beast will to open the sword. The sword unsheathes easily, and as he gazed down at the sword's translucent teal blade, he couldn't help but think he uses some sword techniques and finds it to be a beautiful weapon, too much so to be considered a weapon. However, the sword and sheath are too heavy for him to use right now properly. Suddenly he thinks of something and tears the drum lying in front of him using the sword. Some letters appear on it showing the sword belongs to Dawn. Suddenly his hand burns and the sword falls from his hand. Sylvie comes to him and he tells her that he is fine. She wonders what happened to the sword. Suddenly he again picks it up, and this time the weight and balance change. He uses his sword techniques to check it up. Not only that, but the handle and length of the blade have been shortened a bit in order to accommodate his body vest, with access to the finest weapon. He had held a priceless sword in his hands for dozens of years, yet he had never felt one that matched so perfectly with him than now. He then swiftly moves through the drum, which slashes into two parts. The sword has a clean cut, and Arthur seems to like it. While extremely rare, there have been cases where master artificers have been able to create staffs and wands that have the ability to bond with a single user. The weapon would basically calibrate itself, allowing better manipulation of mana between weapon and master, but he had never read of any cases where a sword had the ability to bind itself to a user. In the meantime, Ray and Vicnit enter the store and ask him to leave, since they are getting late. He then comes to them, and Arthur asks him if he has found anything he likes. He exclaims that it is not as fancy as some of the other swords there, but it grows on him after he takes a few swings. Vincent tells him that it has been auctioned in one of the smaller stalls a few times, but no one bid for it. He takes out the sword and tries some sword skills with it, and Vincent asks him if he likes it. He replies that the weight distribution is a bit off because the creator was trying to make it light, but Arthur thinks it would be a good fit. He also asks him about the stick he got there, and Arthur thinks he needs to play this cool. He replies that he tripped over it on the way back there, and it's pretty sturdy and heavy, so he thought it would be a good practice tool. Vincent doesn't remember seeing this before, and he asks him for permission to see it, and asks the assistant if he has any records of a cane like this. He replies that he remembers that stick, and one of his merchants told him a rather peculiar story about some senile old man who just threw it at him, mumbling about no one being worthy. They have had multiple inspectors check it out in case, and it appears to be a sturdy, hard cane, but it is a bit odd. Perhaps they can find a higher-tier artificer to check it out. Arthur called him Uncle Vincent for the first time, and asked permission to have the stick because he liked it a bit. Vincent happily agreed to give it to him, and he was happy that Arthur called him uncle. After that, they celebrated his birthday, and he thanked everyone for being with him for another year. They were happy that he was 9 years old, and Vincent said there was no reminiscing until after their little celebration. They served them a grand dinner, and everyone was happy to see a number of dishes there. Helstia asked them to get their hands in there and start eating. They had a good time and clicked many family pictures, and the birthday party ended with happy memories. They were playing a game, and Adam made fun, asking him to remember the time the back of his pants caught on fire and he had to go back into town to cover his own bare ass. Durden got embarrassed about this, and Jasmine told Adam that he seemed to have forgotten when a horned mole snuck up right under him while relieving himself in a dungeon. She recalled that he got so scared that he landed flat on his back, pissing on himself like a fountain. Everyone laughed at him loudly, while Adam was so embarrassed and said he thought everyone was sleeping at that time. After that, Ray exclaimed that they had finished dinner, and Adam had been thoroughly humiliated, so that they would move on to presents. They gave him a present from his family, and he asked Ellie to come with him and open it together. They gave him leather gloves, and Alice revealed that the leather was from spiked aurochs, which his father hunted and skinned himself. She imbued a minor healing spell into each of those 3 gems. Each gem only carried a single-use spell, but he figured having some safety measures was a good idea when he went out on missions. He liked the gloves and thanked both of them for the gift. Next was Vincent. He gave him a pair of rings in a romantic way, but Helstia hit him from behind and asked him not to tease the boy. Vincent sadly said nobody there appreciated a little showmanship, and he gave one ring to Arthur, and the other was for Alice. She revealed that as long as Arthur wore his ring, the gem on the ring Alice had would light up if Arthur's mana level dropped down to a dangerous level. Alice hugged her and thanked her for the gift, because it assured her of her son's safety. Arthur thought the ring seemed more like a double-edged sword, and it could free his family from constantly worrying about him, but it could also keep her constantly tense waiting for the ring to go off. Adam said how they could beat their gifts, and because their son was so strong, they actually thought along the same lines as the Helstia family. They offered him something, saying the little monster didn't need anything, and they thought that the whole family would appreciate it. They gave him sound transmission scrolls, and Adam would not elaborate on how expensive they were. But Jasmine hit him from behind before telling him the price. He revealed that with this, he now had a one-time source of communication that he thought paired quite nicely with his new rings. He could just infuse mana into the scroll and record a message, and once Elise received the message, she could reply once, and after confirming that the message had been relayed back to Arthur, the two scrolls would turn into ashes. Ray then asked him if he was excited about tomorrow, and Elise asked him to promise her to be safe. Since it didn't matter what rank he became or how rich he was able to get, he thought he would come back home every chance he got. After that, the twin horns left their home and said goodbye. Arthur thought that he had a family now and people who loved him, and it was a feeling he never wanted to give up. He would treasure it and fight for it if he had to. For that, he needed to better himself, even when he was a king. The next morning, he wanted to shower Sylvie, but she didn't want it, and tried to run from the bathroom while he was trying to drag her back. She used her mana to push him away, and he got angry. He used his mana too, and threw her into the bathtub while she just looked at him with a crying face. After that, he was ready for his adventurer's test, and Ray and Elise were waiting for him downstairs. Ray saw him effectively and said he already looked like an S-class adventurer, and he advised him to know his limits. Even though he was strong, he also trusted Jasmine when things got rough. Ellie was crying, and didn't let him go, asking him if he couldn't stay for a little longer. Alice and Ray were also sad, and they tried to hold Ellie back, saying he would be back before she knew it. He held her hand, and said she was a big girl now, and he had an important job for her. He asked her to protect Mum and Dad while he was gone for a bit, and she hugged him, saying she had been practicing a lot, and she got lots of little lights together now, and she could protect them. He thought he had missed so much of his sister's life, and knew his short time there wasn't enough. However, in order to protect all of them, this was a step he needed to take. He sadly looked toward Elise, but she asked him not to look at her with that face, and she would be fine, soon. They all greet them, and Ray says they will all be fine. And Elise asks him not to forget to keep his ring on when he is about to leave. Ray calls him and says they will always be rooting for him when he comes outside. Jasmine is already waiting for him and asks if he is ready. He wears his mask and asks her to go for now. After that, they go for the adventurer test, and Jasmine observes that his bond looks different today. He replies that he found out recently that she is able to alter her form slightly. This way, she looks just like a black lizard. They go to the counter, where a woman welcomes them at the Cyrus Adventurers Guild Hall and asks how she can help them. Jasmine gives her a form and says she wants to sponsor him for a rank examination. She then asks them to follow her and says they have a few taking examinations today, but on account of having a sponsor, they will bump them closer to the front of the queue so they won't have to wait as long. She takes them to a room while the other contestants whisper about him. They enter a room where the woman informs a man that a class adventurer, Jasmine Flamesworth, has requested this gentleman to be taken in for a rank examination. The man asks the woman to wait outside and asks Jasmine about how she is. She met with her father not long ago, but she stares at him angrily. He introduces himself as Caspian Bladeheart, who is in charge of this branch. He exclaims that there is usually an application to be filled out along with an inspection of his mana core before a series of practical exams. Still, since Miss Flamesworth is sponsoring him, he will waive those steps. He wonders if Jasmine's family is that special, and Caspian says the only thing remaining is for him to do a mock duel against one of their examiners. Judging by his weapons, he observes that he may be a fighter or augmenter. He states that names aren't mandatory to become a registered adventurer. But seeing that he has a close relationship with Jasmine, so he asks him if there's a way to address him. The previous night, when he was staring at the mask, he thought this kind of reminded him of a hard note on a music sheet. So he decides to take his name as note, and he observes Hai just shaking his hand that the man is very strong. Caspian says, Miss Mary will show them to the examination hall, and he just leaves by staring at him. He finds out that the Flamesworth house was mentioned with a fair degree of respect, and he wonders if this is why she wants to accompany him. However, he observed that she seemed pretty upset at the mention of her father back then. Miss Mary shows them a route that will directly take them to the base level where the testing occurs. He requests them to be mindful and head directly up the stairs and remain seated until his name is called. They enter a large room where two contestants are fighting each other. One is attacking while the other is dodging, and he attacks him again, asking him to try to dodge this one. He announces his next attack by the name of Hell Smash, and Arthur wonders why he is announcing his next attack, just like how conjurers chanted spells to focus their intent. Many augmenters similarly chose to vocalize the name of their attack. Arthur thinks it was a bit excessive for such a simple move, and the man is shocked at how he is being defeated. He shouts at him and says, "Some grandmothers swing their walking canes better than he can flail around that pole arm of years." The other adventurer says he depends too much on physical strength compared to his mana reinforcement, throwing his attacks balance off, and his attacks are laughably transparent. He is apparently 35, but he is only at the dark orange stage. The man starts crying and says he has completed his training. He says he would normally put someone of his caliber in E class, but seeing as how he has a fire affinity, he gives him a D rank. Next, they call Diane Whitehall for the exam, and a girl appears there, but she got stuck on the stairs and fell to the ground. Everyone laughs at him, and one of them says they should put her in E class, and that it's just a waste of time to test her. Arthur observes him from a distance, and thinks he seems very strong. The girl comes there, and introduces herself to Diane Whitehall, age 18, a conjurer at the solid orange stage with a single specialization in water. A lady says she doesn't need to introduce herself, they already have their information. She asks her to ready her weapon and know that there are medical staff and an emitter on site in case any injuries arise from their test. Once a conjurer has reached the orange stage, it's apparent where their specialty lies. Rather than trying to become adept at all four elements, focusing solely on the element of one's highest affinity was much more efficient. Arthur heard that for conjurers, claiming dual specialization and up meant the test would be stricter to more accurately test whether the applicants were really adept at multiple elements. The woman says they will now see what he has got. Miss Whitehall and the girl casts a spell to attack her. Jasmine tells her that conjurers aren't as proficient in reinforcing their bodies with mana. As augmenters, they are trained very strictly to say, up defensive measures first during battle. The examiner mage uses her earth attribute and dodges her attack in just an instance. Arthur found it interesting and thought the examiner used that spell to block Diane's vision within her protective water sphere. Diane cast another spell and tried to cast another, but the examiner dodged her every time. Suddenly, her water turned into a blast of fog, and she cast another spell to attack the examiner. Suddenly she disappeared and appeared behind her, and she said her control was quite decent and that his last spell chain was well practiced. She was a bit overconfident about not preparing another defensive measure, but his efficiency in mana control and casting speed were good. She gave him a C-class rank, and Arthur thought C-class at her age was something she should definitely be proud of. The announcer next called Elijah Knight, but he showed something to the examiner on his list. Suddenly, the examiner said he had been informed of his status and was hereby assigned the rank of B-class adventurer. Everyone wondered how they gave him a B-class when he didn't need to get tested. The boy got up from his seat and Arthur stared at him. They called the next contestant, Lucas Wykes, and he was the boy from earlier. He also exclaimed that they should skip over him and just place him in a class. She read his characteristics, such as that he was 11 years old, a conjurer at the light orange stage, and had a single specialization in fire. Arthur was also surprised to see that he was at the light orange stage at 11. While the examiner didn't like him and thought he was just an arrogant child, she asked him to start the test and see what he could do. He used his fire attributes and raised his fire protector, and the other examiner was impressed to see a decent and stable flame guardian. It looked like they had a special talent. Today, they could expect this from a member of the Wakes family, and created a firewall in front of him. He then cast a spell, and the examiner said it seemed he wasn't just full of hot air, but his disrespect showed that he needed to learn some humility. Therefore, she created a dust wall that annihilated his fire. Arthur thought it was a good move from the examiner, and the flame guardian would be naturally extinguished once it used up the limited oxygen inside the tomb. But Lucas smiled and cast another spell, saying it was too late. Arthur had heard that there had never been a case where an examiner had gotten injured while testing new adventurers. He used hundreds of flames to attack him, and the examiner found it difficult to dodge all of them simultaneously. She then tried to dodge, but the attack strength was so powerful that she had to run in order to dodge. She then rushed toward him, created multiple attacks, and reached behind him. She created a soil's hand and made it grab his leg, and Lucas wasn't able to release it. He shouted loudly and asked her to release him. Soon he had been defeated by the examiner and fell to the ground. She exclaimed, "His raw mana pool," An ability to learn high-tier fire affinity spells spoke volumes of his potential. But Lucas again got up and said, "The attack is not over yet." The examiner was unguarded, so she wasn't able to dodge him, but the other examiner rushed in time and blocked his attack. Lucas got angry with him and asked how he dared to interrupt his exam. The examiner replied he was the one who broke the regulation and initiated a surprise spell despite the examination ending. Lucas shouted and called the examiner a witch and said she was the one who got in the way of his next attack by blocking those fire beams. She was the one who deemed the test complete, even though he had everything under control. The examiner asked her to announce his result, and she stated that his mana pool and control were both excellent. Despite the faults displayed from lack of experience, it was more than reasonable to place him into Class B. Lucas seemed in a very bad mood, but quietly went upstairs. Some contestants congratulated him for getting a B class, but he shouted at them and asked them not to compare themselves to him. He thought they had to wait until their father heard of this, and next they called Arthur for the test. Jasmine wished him luck, and he went there, thinking about how to approach this sort of warrior best. The examiner had years of training and experience with his sword, and his movement was explosive and sharp, but he wasn't without gaps in his defense. The examiner asked him to hurry and said they didn't have all day. It seemed like he was testing under special conditions, seeing as they didn't have any information on him, and they would see what he could do. He was scared to feel so much pressure from him, but Caspian reached there and interrupted them all. He then exclaimed that he would be the one to test this particular examinee, and the examiner was surprised that he would be personally examining the candidate. He asked him if there was really a need for an A-class to lower himself to test an examinee, especially a mage of his caliber, and Caspian replied he was not questioning his strength, but he felt obligated to test himself, seeing as his sponsor had sharp, deep ties, and he asked Arthur if he agreed with this and was ready to give the test. However, on examination grounds, people sat there to watch the duel between Arthur and Caspian. Arthur and Caspian stood before each other. Caspian took his sword from the holder and saw Arthur holding his sword. Caspian thought the man who stood before him was not only in charge of the biggest guild halls in Sapin, but was an A-class adventurer himself. Caspian swung his sword, and Arthur, looking toward him, thought he had no apparent openings, and the pressure of his bloodlust was heavy, as if he had no intention of making this a standard test. Caspian pointed his sword toward Arthur, while Arthur, looking toward him, smiled, thinking why he was so excited. Caspian, pointing his sword toward him, said, "Please prepare himself and don't take this special treatment to heart." Arthur, pointing his sword toward him, nodded. Caspian ran toward him and attacked him with his sword, but in time, Arthur swung his sword and turned backwards. Caspian's sword collided with Arthur's sword, and the clash of these swords caused fire ashes. Arthur gritted his teeth, thinking he was fast. Caspian pushed Arthur's sword, and he fell backward on the ground. Caspian swung his sword to attack him. Seeing this, Arthur, lying on the ground, got surprised and quickly rolled from Caspian's front to the backside. Caspian created his wind magic and turned to attack. While Arthur stood there, he saw that wind magic was created around him and was surprised. Meanwhile, Caspian ran toward him from behind to attack. Arthur turned his head quickly and moved toward him. Caspian extended his hand to attack him with his sword, but before he attacked him, Arthur bumped into him. Caspian surprisingly stopped there. Arthur rolled and jumped backwards, swinging his sword. Caspian smiled and wiped his sweat, complimenting Arthur as excellent. After this, Caspian, creating his wind magic, ran toward Arthur, and in response, Arthur, holding his sword, also ran toward him. However, both of their swords collided with each other. Arthur swung his sword, but Caspian moved backward. Arthur rolled and turned toward him. Caspian also turned and extended his hand to attack him with his sword. Caspian attacked Arthur and cut the skin off his face with his sword. When he saw this, Arthur was surprised and struck his sword to attack Caspian. Caspian quickly moved behind his back, and dust emerged from the ground due to his speed. After this, Arthur jumped ahead, and Caspian stood at his back, run toward him. Arthur ran ahead, turned Caspian toward him, and extended his hand to attack him. Caspian's sword was about to stab Arthur's neck, but before it, Arthur moved and turned his neck backward. The sword passed by him. Seeing this, Caspian smiled and ran toward Arthur, while Arthur moved backward, thinking it was clear as they fought what his disadvantages were. Further, he thought his muscles were undeveloped, and he was more than a foot shorter than he was used to when he was in his sword-fighting prime, his body more rigid from the assimilation of Sylvia's dragon. Will was still weaker against a veteran fighter, whose body was enhanced and clad thickly in mana. However, Caspian started using mana and threw the wind magic toward Arthur. Arthur hardly crossed the wind magic and jumped down. Then he quickly ran toward Caspian and struck his sword to attack him. But before he attacked, Caspian's sword clanged with Arthur's sword and pushed him back. Arthur was about to fall back, but he jumped backward and stood far from him. Arthur started to tremble, thinking that even with his training, he was still not accustomed to this undeveloped body. Caspian created his mana, and a green aura emerged from his body. He extended his hand and held the sword toward Arthur, saying he must apologize for underestimating him. Then he slightly smiled, saying he would be a bit more serious. Now he heard this, Arthur trembled, thinking that at that moment his body screamed at him to move. Caspian struck his sword, threw his mana toward Arthur and saw Arthur run away. Caspian with his mana created the wind bullets and threw them toward him while Arthur ran. The bullets hit the wall at his back and the wall got cracked. Caspian turned and moved, creating his mana, saying, "Arthur, seems like Miss Flamesworth has picked up someone worthwhile after all." Hearing this, Arthur running got surprised, then turned and looked toward Caspian. As he turned, Caspian threw the wind bullets toward him. Arthur quickly moved down, thinking the wind bullets were fast and near impossible to see, but their trajectories were predictable. As the wind bullets, in large numbers, moved toward him, Arthur could hardly save himself from these wind bullets by jumping and rolling on the ground. However, Caspian, with his wind mana, was throwing the wind bullets toward him. Arthur, moving toward him, cut the wind bullets with his sword, thinking he needed to close the distance if he at least wanted a fighting chance. Arthur jumped and rolled while crossing the wind bullet, and moving toward Caspian, he also created fire magic, attacked the wind bullets with his fireball and broke it. Arthur was moving toward him while Caspian was throwing wind bullets toward him from his side. Arthur got closer, thinking he was in range, and he created fire magic, covering his sword with fire magic. As the fire emerged from his sword, the trainers and Jasmine were surprised to see it. However, Arthur with his flaming sword cut through the wind's magic, and Caspian stood before him smiling, thinking he was a fire mage. Arthur struck with his flaming sword, and Caspian moved toward him and swung his sword to stop Arthur's sword, as both of them created their magic and pushed each other's swords. Wind magic and fire emerged from the point where both swords collided. Moreover, the fire and the wind explosion occurred there, and they stood before each other, pushing swords. Arthur stood before him, pushing his sword, and looked toward him. His one eye was glowing due to his fire magic activation. While Caspian pushed his sword, he smiled, thinking the outcome should have been clear. He was an Ore-class adventurer capable of long-range spells most augments would kill for. Further, with a smile, he stared at Arthur and questioned why he was nervous. Suddenly, Caspian gritted his teeth, thinking, "No, this can't be." Then, while gritting his teeth and throwing his wind magic toward him, he said, "Don't get cocky." Arthur was surprised when the strong gust of magic wind pushed him backward. Both stood far from each other, creating and sending their magic toward each other. Caspian struck his sword and threw the windstorm toward Arthur, and in return, Arthur also sent fire magic toward the wind magic to cut it. After seeing this, Jasmine surprisingly got up from the boundary and raised her voice note. As soon as Jasmine got up, Sylvie fell from her lap. Caspian created the wind magic by swinging his sword and throwing the wind bullets toward Arthur, while Arthur stood in the distance creating fire magic and got surprised, thinking he hadn't even regained his footing. He snapped as the wind bullets were about to hit Arthur, but before this, he jumped up and created the piston stamp magic. Then he flew in the air and moved toward Caspian to attack him, while Caspian stood down and sent wind magic toward the ground. Arthur stood there as he noticed Arthur coming toward him in the air, creating flame magic. He turned his wind magic storm toward Arthur. Arthur's face hit the windstorm and he fell, thinking he had come too far, while Caspian stood before him, smiling, saying, "Impressive." Looking toward Caspian, Arthur believed his casting speed was even faster. Caspian, with his wind magic storm, attacked Arthur. Arthur stood there and started dragging toward Caspian because of that gust of windstorm. Arthur, lying down on the ground, was surprised while Caspian threw the windstorm toward him. Arthur sat up and quickly moved from that area and activated his flaming sword, thinking he keeps pushing him to force more of his cards. Moreover, Arthur burst from the ground, thinking so be it. He created his flame magic, tearing through the air, moved toward Caspian, and grabbed his hand in which he held the sword, and created wind magic. Caspian had already witnessed the piston stamp, but this spell Arthur had devised truly shone when used in near-instant succession. Arthur, grabbing his hand, got closer to Caspian, and then looked into his eyes also. A bright aura was released from Arthur's eyes. Caspian looked toward him and gritted his teeth, thinking, will he lose? Caspian shouted and threw the windstorm with all his might. Arthur fell away with disgust of wind, and everybody stood there to see that fight, including the trainers. Jasmine, Lucas and Elijah surprisingly put their hands over their faces because that windstorm was so fast. Arthur sat on the ground and created his flame magic to attack him, but suddenly he was surprised to see the wind start swirling and Caspian standing in his windstorm, turning his storm wind toward Arthur. Also, Arthur didn't accept his defeat and resisted this wind magic with full force. Caspian angrily looked toward Arthur, panting, seeing this. Jasmine stood up on the boundaries, took out her dagger, raising her voice. Arthur note. Also Sylvia started making noise, but he stood there on the ground answering her. Screw this. However, Arthur thinks two schools of lightning magic exist, external and internal at the same time. The books say that internal lightning magic is too complicated for mages to learn for a relatively small increase in power, but he disagrees. Arthur angrily swung his flaming sword, thinking with his enhanced speed and reflexes, he should be able to dodge everything. He hoped also. His eyes glowed and his body turned black. Arthur ran toward him to attack. Suddenly he crackled there because Caspian released his magic, surprised. Arthur stood there, and Caspian put his sword in the holder. He said he got a bit carried away. To test his limits, my apologies. Then he turned his eyes and looked toward Arthur, who said that given that he so adamantly withheld his full abilities until the end, he could only assume that he wished to be placed at a lower rank. Arthur scratched his mask, thinking he noticed, and there the trainer announced, Note B rank, while the people in the stadium whispered to each other. Did he see what a monster B rank was? Lucas angrily gritted his teeth while Elijah silently stood there. After this, Caspian turned and looked toward the door of his Cyrus Guild Hall. The receptionist stood at the entrance, holding the upper shirt and waiting for him. Caspian turned, looking toward Arthur, and asked if he was sure he had no problem with this. In response, Arthur nodded. Jasmine and Sylvia from the stadium ran toward Arthur, and they both came to him. Jasmine put a hand on his shoulder, while Sylvia brushed his legs. Arthur stood behind and looked toward Caspian leaving. Caspian was angry, and his receptionist was coming after him.